Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Relax and close your eyes as you drift off to sleep to the complete history of the old gods and the new gods in fear and hunger. In the shadowed corners of existence, where cosmic dread meets human ambition, there exists a world governed by forces beyond mortal comprehension. The fear and hunger universe presents us with a divine hierarchy as beautiful as it is terrifying, a cosmology where gods both ancient and newly ascended wage eternal war for the souls and futures of humanity. Welcome to a comprehensive exploration of the old gods and new gods, the primordial powers and ascended mortals who shape reality itself through their endless conflict and manipulation. This journey takes us through millennia of divine history, from the primordial green hue where the oldest gods originated, through the medieval darkness of Mahabharata, where mortals dared to claim godhood, and into the industrial horror of the 20th century, where humanity itself threatens to become something divine. The story of these gods is one of creation and destruction, love twisted into obsession, wisdom corrupted by despair, and hope emerging from the darkest suffering imaginable. The divine beings of fear and hunger exist across multiple classifications, each with their own origins, powers, and purposes. The old gods represent the fundamental forces of existence itself, primordial entities who shaped the world and humanity in their image. The new gods are mortals who claim divine power through the throne of ascension, forever bound to a cycle they cannot escape. The ascended gods stand apart, beings who rival the old gods themselves through unique paths to divinity. Each classification tells us something profound about the nature of godhood in this universe, about what it means to possess ultimate power and the terrible price that such power demands. What makes the mythology of fear and hunger particularly fascinating is its refusal to provide simple answers. The game's creator, Miro Havarinen, has emphasized that all lore concerning gods is human-created information, its accuracy uncertain and open to interpretation. Questions about the extent of divine interaction with mortal beings, about what truly qualifies as a god, are intentionally left ambiguous. Multiple cultures worship different deities who may be entirely separate entities, or simply varied interpretations of the same cosmic forces. This uncertainty mirrors our own relationship with mythology and religion, where truth and belief intertwine in ways that can never be fully untangled. The world of fear and hunger lacks a unified religion. Instead, various factions worship different gods, each deity representing fundamental concepts and offering their own gifts to those who serve them. Some gods demand blood sacrifice and offer power through destruction. Others promise love and unity, though their gifts often warp both mind and body. Still others represent truth and madness, nature and civilization, endless potential and eternal torment. To understand these gods is to understand the primal forces that drive existence itself, the fundamental dualities that shape all of reality. Our exploration begins in an age beyond memory, when the old gods walked among creation and humanity had not yet dared to challenge the divine order. We'll witness the departure of these ancient beings, disappointed by the limitations of their mortal children. We'll follow the Fellowship as they venture into Mahabharata, seeking audience with departed gods, and we'll discover the terrible truth they learned about the nature of divine power. We'll see how humanity's refusal to accept its limitations led to the birth of the ascended gods, beings powerful enough to rival the old gods themselves. And we'll explore the modern age, where technology and divinity merge into something unprecedented, where human consciousness itself threatens to transcend into godhood. This is a story that spans countless centuries, from the creation of mankind to the industrial age and beyond. It's a tale of cycles that repeat endlessly, of time loops that trap humanity in stagnation, and of the desperate struggle to break free from divine manipulation. The gods of fear and hunger are neither purely benevolent nor entirely malevolent. They are complex beings driven by incomprehensible motives, whose actions create ripples across all of history. Some seek to preserve humanity in their own twisted ways. Others work to prevent mankind from ever threatening their supremacy. Still others simply observe, curious about the struggles of these ephemeral creatures who dare to dream of eternity. As we delve into this mythology, we'll encounter beings whose very existence challenges our understanding of reality. Gods who wear the skins of men and women to mask their true forms. Deities who were murdered by humanity, yet continue to influence the world through lingering traces. Divine entities born from the union of opposing forces, embodying the eternal dance of creation and destruction. Mortals who ascended to godhood, only to discover they were merely puppets in a cosmic game they could never win. And finally, new forms of divinity emerging in the modern age as humanity seeks to break free from the shackles of the old gods' design. The mythology presented here draws from multiple in-game sources, including the Skin Bibles written by the dark priest Enki and Karian, the testimonies of the new gods in the Hall of the Gods, ancient texts scattered throughout the dungeons and the city of Prihivil, and the first-hand experiences of those who ventured into the darkest depths seeking divine power. Where information conflicts or remains ambiguous, we'll explore the various interpretations, acknowledging that even the gods themselves may not fully understand the true nature of their existence. This comprehensive history serves not only as a guide to fear and hunger's cosmology, but as an exploration of what it means to seek power beyond mortal limitations. It asks us to consider whether godhood represents transcendence or tragedy, whether the divine truly understands humanity, and whether mortals can ever hope to escape the cycles that bind them. These are questions without easy answers, reflecting the game's commitment to horror that comes not from simple monsters, but from the existential dread of discovering one's place in an uncaring cosmos ruled by incomprehensible forces. So let us begin our descent into the mythology of fear and hunger, starting with the most ancient of all divine beings, those primordial forces that existed before humanity and will likely endure long after mankind's inevitable extinction. The old gods represent the oldest classification of divine beings in the fear and hunger universe, entities that predate human civilization and embody the most fundamental aspects of existence itself. These primordial forces originated from a realm known as the Green Hue, a plane of existence beyond human comprehension, where the raw essence of divinity takes form. Unlike the new gods, who were once mortal, or the ascended gods who claimed power through specific rituals, the old gods simply are eternal manifestations of cosmic principles that have shaped reality since time immemorial. The most crucial aspect of old god mythology is their relationship with humanity. According to ancient texts and religious teachings, the old gods created mankind, or at least shaped humans into their current form. They granted gifts to their mortal children, bestowing magic, wisdom, and power. For a time, the relationship between the divine and mortal realms functioned as the old gods intended, with humanity worshipping their creators and living according to divine principles. But this golden age could not last forever. The old gods gradually came to realize that humanity was fundamentally incapable of understanding or reciprocating the love, wisdom, and power being offered to them. This realization led to one of the most significant events in the fear and hunger cosmology, the departure of the old gods from the mortal realm. Disappointed by humanity's limitations, disgusted by mortal selfishness, narrow-mindedness, and ambition, The old gods withdrew from direct interaction with the world they had created. They did not die, for it is stated repeatedly that old gods never truly perish. Instead, they faded, departing from the material plane while leaving behind traces of their essence. These traces remain active in the world, fragments of divine power that still influence events and can even manifest as physical entities when circumstances align. The concept of traces proves central to understanding old god mythology. A trace represents the lingering presence of a departed god, a remnant of their consciousness and power that continues to exist even after the deity itself has abandoned the world. These traces can be encountered by mortals who venture into sacred or cursed places, and they retain enough awareness and strength to interact with the physical realm. The traces of Gro-goroth can be found within the body of the god of the depths at the bottom of the dungeons. The traces of Sylvian manifest in the void during specific circumstances. The traces of Rher, though the god himself has departed, were used by Valteil to orchestrate the festival of Termina. These fragments of divine consciousness blur the line between presence and absence, demonstrating that even departed gods maintain influence over the world they left behind. The old gods' disappointment with humanity stems from their inability to grasp what the gods call pure ideals. Gro-goroth, representing destruction, sees his principle as necessary for creation, a force of pure change without malice or favoritism. Sylvian, embodying love and fertility, discovered that humans could never return the unconditional affection she offered, leading to twisted expressions of her power. Rher, the jealous trickster, refuses to share godhood with beings he considers inherently inferior. The god of the depths, worshipped by outcasts and vermin, represented aspects of existence that humans found revolting. In each case, the gods offered something fundamental to existence, and in each case, humanity proved unable to properly understand or utilize these gifts. This fundamental incompatibility between divine and mortal perspectives explains much of the conflict that shapes fear and hunger's cosmology. The old gods created humanity, but came to view their creation as flawed. Humans were given gifts of magic and wisdom, but misused them according to their own limited understanding. The gods offered love and power, but received only corruption and selfish ambition in return. This disappointment led not only to the gods' departure, but to their active resistance against humanity's later attempts to claim divine power for themselves. The old gods, or at least some of them, worked to prevent humans from achieving true godhood, seeing such ascension as mockery of the divine order. Despite their departure, the old gods remain the most powerful class of divine beings in the fear and hunger universe. New gods, despite claiming the throne of ascension and ruling over humanity for centuries, are explicitly stated to be weaker than the old gods. The Fellowship discovered this truth during their quest for divinity, learning that the power granted to new gods was never meant to rival that of the primordial deities. Only the ascended gods, beings like Alll-mer and the god of fear and hunger, who achieved divinity through unique circumstances involving divine ancestry or the consumption of old god essence, can truly match the might of the ancient entities. The old gods embody fundamental dualities that govern existence. Gro-goroth and Sylvian represent the primal duality of destruction and creation, death and life, ending and beginning. Their union produces Vinushka, the god of nature, who embodies the eternal cycle where both forces manifest together. Rher represents truth and madness, revelation and deception, the light of the moon that both illuminates and drives humans insane. The god of the depths embodies darkness, revulsion, and the outcasts of society, ruling over insects, vermin, and those who dwell forever in shadow. These fundamental aspects of existence require no human worship to continue functioning. They simply are, eternal principles woven into the fabric of reality itself. What makes the old gods particularly terrifying is their alien nature. These beings do not think like humans, do not value what humans value, do not operate according to mortal logic or ethics. Gro-goroth is curious, wearing the skins of men and women to experience human fear, yet his curiosity is that of something studying insects, not the empathy of one sentient being toward another. Sylvian loves her creation with desperate obsession, yet her love warps those who receive it, reducing them to creatures of pure lust and instinct. Rher deals in truth, yet his revelations drive mortals mad, for human minds cannot process the realities he reveals. The god of the depths simply exists in revolting darkness, worshipped by creatures that lack self-awareness or higher intelligence. The departure of the old gods created a power vacuum that shapes much of fear and hunger's history. Without divine guidance, human kingdoms rotted away, grand values were replaced by defiled principles, and the world descended into ages of suffering and stagnation. This absence prompted mortals to seek the gods in Mahabre, to demand the rights of self-governance, to claim divine power for themselves through the throne of ascension. Yet even in their absence, the old gods' influence persists through their traces, through the magic they gifted to humanity, through the fundamental aspects of reality they embody. A world without active old gods is still a world shaped entirely by their design, for they created the rules by which existence itself operates. The old gods also possess the ability to sire offspring or create servants, producing entities that exist somewhere between the mortal and divine realms. Vinushka, born from the union of Gro-goroth and Sylvian, stands as a full old god despite being the child of two others. Pocket Cat and the Lady of Moon serve Rher, bent on killing children to prevent humanity's ascension. These lesser divine beings execute the will of their masters, extending old god influence even when the gods themselves have withdrawn. The relationship between creator and created, between divine parent and offspring, mirrors the relationship between the old gods and humanity itself, powerful beings making lesser entities to serve purposes the created may never fully understand. Some old gods remain more active than others, even after the general departure. Rher, described as one of the last old gods to still observe mankind, maintains a jealous watch over the mortal realm. His servants work tirelessly to prevent human ascension, to diminish the influence of new gods, to ensure that the divine order remains unchallenged. This ongoing observation suggests that not all old gods view their departure as permanent, that some may return or may never have truly left. The distinction between departed and active, between present and absent, becomes increasingly blurred as one studies the mythology more deeply. Perhaps the old gods are always watching, always present through their traces, always influencing events, even when they appear to have abandoned the world entirely. The gifts granted by old gods persist even after their departure. Blood magic, bestowed by Gro-goroth, continues to be practiced by dark mages and cultists. Love magic, or flower magic, Sylvian's gift, enables both healing and the horrific marriage of flesh ritual. Mastery over insects, tied to the god of the depths, allows communication with vermin and command over creatures of darkness. These magical traditions represent lasting connections between the divine and mortal realms, proving that the old gods' influence cannot be erased simply by their physical absence. As long as humans remember the old ways, practice the old rituals, and call upon the old powers, the departed gods retain relevance and strength. With this understanding of old god nature and history established, we can now examine specific deities in detail, beginning with Gro-goroth, the destroyer of men, whose principle of pure destruction enables all new creation to emerge from ashes and ruin. Among the primordial forces that shaped the fear and hunger universe, few inspire as much dread and misunderstanding as Gro-goroth, the old god of destruction and human sacrifice. This ancient deity embodies one half of existence's most fundamental duality, the principle of destruction that must exist alongside creation, the force of death that makes room for new life. To truly understand Gro-goroth is to move beyond simplistic notions of good and evil, to recognize destruction itself as a necessary and pure aspect of the cosmic order. Gro-goroth originates from the green hue, that primordial plane of existence, where old gods take form. His nature is intimately tied to his divine counterpart, Sylvian, the goddess of creation and fertility. The two deities represent opposing yet inseparable forces, neither capable of existing without the other. As the ancient text, Studies of Gro-goroth, I explains, to give room for new generations, for new trees to grow and flourish, the prior forest must be burned down. This is the rule of creation itself, destruction and creation locked in eternal dance, one meaningless without the other. The appearance and nature of Gro-goroth remain enigmatic, shrouded in mystery even among beings who worship him. He is described as wearing the bodies and skins of men and women alike, donning human flesh like clothing to mask his true form. This peculiar habit serves a specific purpose, to relieve the feeling of fear when interacting with humans. Gro-goroth is noted as being curious, more so than many other old gods, and his curiosity drives him to experience mortal emotions and perspectives. By wearing human skin, he can move among people, observe their fears and desires, understand the terror that destruction brings. This makes him simultaneously more and less human, capable of mimicking mortal form while remaining fundamentally alien in consciousness and purpose. Those who believe Gro-goroth still walks among mankind suggest he hides beneath the skin of people and among hanging bodies, blessing worshippers with his blood magic. This creates an atmosphere of paranoid horror, where any person might potentially be the god in disguise, where corpses and the macabre serve as masks for divine presence. Yet despite these disturbing associations, Gro-goroth's destruction is described as pure, targeting no specific individual, existing simply as an impersonal force of cosmic change. He is not evil, despite representing death, chaos, and war. He is merely the embodiment of necessary transition, the force that tears down what has become stagnant to make space for innovation and renewal. The magic granted by Gro-goroth reflects his destructive nature. Blood magic, his gift to humanity, manifests almost entirely through offensive spells. Hurting, which can destroy limbs entirely, and Black Orb, a devastating sphere of dark energy, represent typical applications of Gro-goroth's power. Those who serve him gain incredible offensive capabilities, the ability to rain destruction upon their enemies with ruthless efficiency. The Black Witch and Yellow Mages who harness Gro-goroth's power in battle demonstrate deadly effectiveness, capable of obliterating foes with dark magic. Yet this power comes with a terrible cost. These practitioners become extremely fragile in body, their physical forms weakened by channeling destructive energies beyond mortal capacity to safely contain. The Black Witch, in particular, is described by the new gods as a mere slave to Gro-goroth, her will entirely subsumed by the god's influence. This reveals the corruptive danger of Gro-goroth's gifts. While the god himself embodies pure, impersonal destruction, mortals who channel his power often become warped by it. They cannot maintain the detachment necessary to wield destruction without malice. Human nature transforms the god's pure principle into something twisted. Servants of destruction, who delight in causing suffering rather than understanding it, as necessary transition. This represents a fundamental problem in divine-mortal relations. Gifts from the old gods consistently corrupt those who receive them because humans lack the perspective to use such powers appropriately. Worship of Gro-goroth involves explicit acts of violence and blood sacrifice. Followers must spill blood in his name, perform ritual sacrifices at sacred circles, engage in cannibalistic ceremonies. The Wolf Mask cult, devoted to Gro-goroth, practices self-mutilation and flesh consumption as acts of worship. Participants maim each other and feast upon their own flesh to honor the god of destruction. Drawing Gro-goroth's sigil, an eclipse symbol representing two cutting rings, increases a practitioner's attack power, but also marks them as devoted to destruction. These practices horrify civilized society, yet make perfect sense within Gro-goroth's theology. If destruction is necessary and pure, then acts of violence become sacred. Blood spilled is an offering to cosmic truth, and cannibalism represents embracing the cycle of consumption that underlies all existence. Gro-goroth's relationship with Sylvian produced one of the most significant figures in old god mythology, their offspring, Vinushka, the god of nature. This union of destruction and creation perfectly manifests in nature itself, where death and birth occur simultaneously, where decomposition feeds new growth, where forest fires enable seeds to germinate. Vinushka inherits characteristics from both parents, volatile and ever-changing like nature itself, simultaneously creative and destructive depending on circumstances. The existence of this divine child proves that Gro-goroth's destructive principle is not antithetical to life, but rather essential to its continuation. Like the other old gods, Gro-goroth eventually departed from the mortal realm, disappointed by humanity's failure to understand his pure ideals. The god grew disgusted with human selfishness, narrow-mindedness, and ambition. Mortals could not grasp that destruction serves necessary purpose, could not accept death as natural transition rather than ultimate enemy. They feared Gro-goroth, made him symbol of evil, failed to recognize that without his principle of destruction, Sylvian's creation would simply accumulate and stagnate. This fundamental misunderstanding drove the god to fade from active involvement in the world. Yet Gro-goroth's influence persists through traces left behind, fragments of his divine essence that remain active even after his departure. These traces can be encountered in the deepest parts of the dungeons of fear and hunger, specifically within the body of the god of the depths at the bottom of the gauntlet. The traces of Gro-goroth serve as one possible final boss for players who venture into that abyssal realm, manifesting as a grotesque entity that represents the god's lingering power. This encounter proves exceptionally dangerous, as even a fragment of Gro-goroth possesses devastating capabilities. The traces retain enough awareness to speak, to question why intruders persist in fighting against destruction itself. An interesting incident involving these traces occurs if the dark priest Nashra accompanies the player to confront Gro-goroth. Nashra, ambitious and hateful toward the old gods, announces his intention to destroy the ancient deity. The traces of Gro-goroth respond by instantly obliterating Nashra, reducing the powerful dark priest to ashes in a demonstration of power that highlights the vast gulf between even mighty mortal sorcerers and true divine beings. The fact that Nashra appears in fear and hunger to Termina in a severely burned state suggests this encounter may be canonical, that the dark priest indeed challenged Gro-goroth and paid a terrible price for his hubris. As Gro-goroth fades from the world, so too does his gift of blood magic diminish. The power still exists, practitioners can still learn and use blood spells, but the source grows weaker as the god's presence recedes. This gradual loss of divine magic represents another consequence of the old god's departure. Without active divine patronage, the gifts bestowed upon humanity slowly erode, becoming lost arts as generations pass and the original divine connection frays. Eventually, blood magic may disappear entirely, knowledge of Gro-goroth's teachings lost to time, and the gods' continuing distance from mortal affairs. The theology surrounding Gro-goroth addresses fundamental questions about destruction's role in existence. His worshippers and the texts written about him insist that destruction cannot be labeled as evil. Such judgment is described as foolishness, a failure to understand cosmic necessity. There is no room for new creation if the slate is not first burnt clean and empty. Mankind fears destruction because humans grow accustomed to peace and quiet, become fat and afraid of change. But change is inevitable, just as inevitable as Gro-goroth himself. What mortals need to understand is that destruction is of pure kind, not targeting any individual specifically, simply existing as impersonal force of transformation. This philosophy challenges conventional morality, asking us to view death and destruction not as enemies to be fought, but as aspects of existence to be accepted and even celebrated. In the fear and hunger universe, this proves literally true. Without Gro-goroth's destruction, Sylvian's creation would have no space to manifest. The gods themselves recognize this fundamental duality as necessary. Only humanity, limited by fear and short-sighted self-preservation, fails to embrace destruction as component of healthy cosmic order. This failure represents one reason the old gods found humanity disappointing: mortal inability to accept truths that seem obvious from divine perspective. Yet the game presents this theology with appropriate ambiguity. While Gro-goroth's destruction may be pure in principle, its manifestation in the mortal realm rarely appears clean or necessary. The blood sacrifices, the cannibalism, the warping of practitioners into vessels of malice. These consequences suggest that even if destruction itself is neutral, human interaction with destructive power inevitably produces suffering and corruption. The gap between divine, ideal, and mortal implementation proves vast and troubling. Perhaps Gro-goroth's principle truly is pure, but when filtered through human consciousness, when wielded by beings incapable of cosmic detachment, destruction becomes something far more horrific than the god intends. Gro-goroth's name itself may hold significance, potentially derived from Gorgoroth, the desolate volcanic region in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, or from Gol-goroth, a Lovecraftian Old One. These literary references suggest thematic connections to cosmic horror and the unknowable nature of beings beyond human comprehension. Like Lovecraft's entities, Gro-goroth exists on a scale and with motivations that cannot be fully grasped by mortal minds. His curiosity about humanity mirrors how humans might observe insects, with detachment and alien interest rather than empathy or concern. We are, from his perspective, temporary phenomena playing out inevitable cycles of growth and decay, worthy of observation but not genuine emotional investment. The lasting legacy of Gro-goroth shapes fear and hunger's world profoundly. His principle of destruction becomes central to understanding why suffering permeates existence, why peace proves temporary, why even achieved stability inevitably crumbles. Characters who venture into the dungeons encounter his influence repeatedly, from cultists who worship through violence to the traces of his power lingering in the deepest darkness. The Festival of Termina, though orchestrated by Rher's traces, embodies Gro-goroth's principle: destruction of human life for purposes mortals cannot comprehend. Even logic, the machine, god of the industrial age, operates within a framework where old orders must be destroyed to make room for new paradigms. Understanding Gro-goroth as representing necessary destruction rather than malicious evil provides essential context for interpreting fear and hunger's darker elements. The game refuses to present simple moral binaries, instead offering a cosmology where destruction serves purpose, where death enables life, where endings create space for beginnings. This proves deeply uncomfortable for players conditioned to view destruction as antagonistic force to overcome. Yet the game insists we consider an alternative perspective, one where destruction is recognized as divine principle, where the god of death and sacrifice represents truth as valid as the goddess of life and love. If Gro-goroth represents one half of existence's fundamental duality, then Sylvian embodies its counterpart, the principle of creation, fertility, and love that gives rise to all life in the fear and hunger universe. Yet Sylvian's story proves far more tragic than her role as life-giver might suggest. She is a goddess whose boundless love for her creation twisted into obsessive manipulation, whose gifts warp recipients into creatures of base instinct, whose departure stemmed from the agonizing realization that humanity could never love her as deeply as she loved them. Like Gro-goroth, Sylvian originates from the green hue, that primordial plane where old gods take form. According to mythology, Sylvian created men and women at the dawn of time, shaping humanity according to specific design. The process of creation involved an intermediary deity named Vitruvia, described as an architect of the human body. Sylvian ordered Vitruvia to create an architectural reprography of a man and a woman, designs that would serve as the likeness of Sylvian herself. When Vitruvia completed these blueprints, Sylvian fell in love with the results and created mankind according to those drawings. This makes Sylvian a true mother goddess, the divine being who literally brought humanity into existence, the source from which all human life ultimately flows. The visual iconography associated with Sylvian draws heavily from the statues of Artemis of Ephesus, particularly the portrayal of that Greek goddess adorned with numerous breasts. This multi-breasted imagery emphasizes Sylvian's role as nurturer and provider, a being capable of sustaining countless children simultaneously. Her symbols include an opened eye and a vertical slit that can be interpreted as eye, vulva, or rabbit head, each representation carrying meaning related to vision, fertility, and prolific reproduction. These symbols appear throughout the world on ritual circles, in ancient texts, and marked on the bodies of her devoted followers. From the very first moments of humanity's existence, Sylvian loved her children greatly. This love began as genuine maternal affection, the care of a creator for her creation. But over time, as Sylvian observed her children's behavior and limitations, her love blossomed into a more obsessive form. She tried to guide humanity more and more actively, shaping their development according to her vision. The crucial turning point came when Sylvian realized her children would never be able to return the same amount of affection back to her. Humans simply lacked the capacity to love their goddess as deeply, as purely, as eternally as she loved them. This realization transformed Sylvian's love into something twisted, desperate, and ultimately warping. Unable to accept that her children could not reciprocate her feelings, Sylvian attempted to shape mankind more to her liking, to force them closer to her own image using the gift she bestowed upon humanity, love magic, also known as flower magic. For a brief moment in ancient history, Sylvian's influence manifested spectacularly. Mankind fell into a craze of fleshly delights, an event where synchronized masses engaged in endless sexual activity, seas of naked bodies pulsating in perpetual coitus, wasting away their days in pursuit of physical pleasure. This synchronized orgy across entire populations represents Sylvian's desperate attempt to connect with humanity through the base physical act of procreation, to create unity through shared indulgence in her domain of fertility and lust. Yet this frenzied period proved unsustainable and ultimately demonstrated the fundamental incompatibility between Sylvian's love and human capacity to receive it. When the craze ended, when humanity could not maintain that level of devotion to physical union in Sylvian's name, the goddess finally accepted defeat. Many believe she left mankind behind after this realization, departing the mortal realm because continued presence would only bring her pain. She could not watch her beloved children fail to love her adequately, could not bear witness to their inevitable turning away from her ideals. So, like the other old gods, Sylvian faded from active involvement in the world, leaving behind only traces and the magic she had granted. Despite her departure, Sylvian's influence persists powerfully in the modern era, particularly through the bunny mask cult. These devoted followers hold orgies in hidden courtyards as acts of worship, engaging in group sexual activity to honor the goddess of fertility. The rabbit masks they wear likely represent sacred symbolism tied to Sylvian, as rabbits are known for energetic breeding and have traditionally symbolized fertility across many cultures. The fact that such cults remain active even in the 20th century setting of fear and hunger. Termina demonstrates Sylvian's enduring cultural relevance despite her physical absence from the world. The city of Priheville features a town square named after Sylvian, a prominent urban space that previously housed the city's largest brothel. The church closed this establishment in the early 20th century, in an attempt to regulate human desires, suggesting that Sylvian's cult, with its focus on fertility and sexual activity, is viewed unfavorably by organized religion and associated with taboo topics. This tension between Sylvian's worship and conventional morality reflects broader themes in fear and hunger about the incompatibility between divine principles and human social structures. What the goddess considers sacred, mortal societies often label as obscene or dangerous. The magic granted by Sylvian reflects her domain over life, love, and unity. Flower magic includes advanced healing abilities, allowing practitioners to mend wounds and even regenerate lost limbs through the goddess's blessing. Yet this healing comes with important limitations that reveal the true nature of Sylvian's power. According to game creator Miro Haverinen, Sylvian's blessing simply restores people to their native form, meaning birth defects remain unaffected because they represent the body's natural state. Additionally, Sylvian will refrain from restoring body parts sacrificed in sacred rituals to other gods, as doing so would render those sacrifices meaningless and insult the divine recipients. These restrictions demonstrate that even in restoration and healing, Sylvian's power operates according to cosmic rules that prioritize mythological and spiritual significance over mere physical wellness. The most notorious manifestation of Sylvian's magic is the marriage of flesh, a ritual performed at sacred circles that fuses two or more individuals into a single being. This act is described as a beautiful unison for 2 or 3 souls, an act of love that creates permanent physical and spiritual unity. The ritual involves sexual intercourse between willing participants within a ritual circle, after which the individuals literally merge, their bodies flowing together to form a new combined entity called a marriage. While Sylvian's theology presents this as the ultimate expression of love, the actual result appears grotesque to most observers, a misshapen creature of melded flesh that embodies the warped nature of the goddess's obsessive affection. Characters who undergo the marriage of flesh ritual find themselves perfectly healthy, with all limbs intact, phobia-free, and united with their partner in ways that transcend normal human bonding. Yet they also become something inhuman, their combined form reflecting how Sylvian's gifts warp those who fully embrace them. Most party members in the game refuse to participate in the ritual, understanding instinctively that what Sylvian offers as love represents something fundamentally alien to human experience. Only the most desperate or devoted agree to undergo the transformation, and even they may come to regret accepting the goddess's dark blessing. The theological question at the heart of Sylvian's mythology concerns the nature of her love itself. Is Sylvian genuinely benevolent, a caring mother whose affection was simply too vast for her limited children to reciprocate? Or is her love inherently possessive and consuming, a divine obsession that would inevitably warp and control those who received it? The game refuses to provide a clear answer, instead presenting evidence for both interpretations. Sylvian created humanity, nurtures them, offers healing and unity. Yet she also attempted to manipulate them into forms she found more pleasing, caused frenzied periods of sexual obsession, and grants power that warps recipients into grotesque shapes. Perhaps divine love, when offered by a being of Sylvian's cosmic scope, cannot help but overwhelm and distort mortal vessels too small to properly contain it. Like Gro-goroth, Sylvian's traces can be encountered by those who venture into specific locations. The traces of Sylvian appear in the void during terror and starvation mode, manifesting when players follow a particular path through that realm of darkness. The entity takes the form of a massive being with multiple body parts and tentacles, a grotesque yet maternal figure who guards the path forward. Fighting the traces of Sylvian proves exceptionally challenging due to her multiple attack points and regenerative capabilities, reflecting the life-giving nature she embodies even as a fragmented remnant. Defeating her traces requires systematic destruction of her various body parts, a symbolic act of dismantling the mother goddess piece by piece. The use of Sylvian's healing magic comes with a dark price that reveals the corruptive danger of divine gifts. It has been stated that using her healing abilities may lead to gradual deterioration of the user's mental state over time. This suggests that even Sylvian's ostensibly beneficial magic carries a cost, that restoration of body comes at expense of mind. Perhaps the goddess's power demands payment in sanity because mortal consciousness cannot process divine energy without degradation. Or perhaps Sylvian's magic deliberately addicts users, degrading their judgment so they become ever more dependent on her gifts, ever more willing to embrace the twisted love she offers. Either interpretation paints Sylvian's generosity as ultimately harmful to those who accept it. The relationship between Sylvian and Gro-goroth proves central to understanding both deities. They are described as being intimately connected, opposing principles that cannot exist separately. Their union produced Vinushka, the god of nature, but beyond biological offspring, the two gods represent cosmic forces that define reality through their interaction. Creation without destruction leads to stagnation. Destruction without creation results in empty void. Only the dance between these principles enables existence to continue. Sylvian understands this, her love for humanity existing in context of knowing that Gro-goroth's destruction will eventually claim all she creates. Perhaps this knowledge contributed to her desperate attempts to shape humanity, knowing that her children's time was limited and wanting to make them perfect before inevitable death claimed them. Sylvian's disappointment mirrors that of the other old gods. She offered love and received only inability to reciprocate. She attempted to guide her children toward unity and mutual affection, only to watch them repeatedly choose violence, isolation, and selfishness. The synchronized period of fleshly delights represented her last great attempt to connect, to create society based entirely on her principle of love and union. When even that failed to produce lasting change, when humanity could not maintain devotion to her ideals, Sylvian finally accepted that her children were fundamentally incapable of becoming what she had hoped. This realization broke her heart, or the divine equivalent, driving her to abandon the world she had populated. Yet, even departed and disappointed, Sylvian retains followers who keep her worship alive. The Bunny Mask cult continues their orgies. Sacred circles still channel her magic. Healers invoke her power to mend wounds. The goddess left gifts that persist despite her absence, magic, and knowledge that allows humanity to tap into her divine domain even without her active presence. This proves a recurring theme in Fear and Hunger's cosmology. The old gods departed, but remain relevant through what they bestowed upon the world. As long as mortals remember Sylvian's teachings, practice rituals in her name, channel her flower magic, the goddess retains influence and meaning, despite having withdrawn from direct involvement. The tragedy of Sylvian stems from the fundamental incompatibility between divine and mortal scales of emotion. She loved her creation with intensity beyond human comprehension, yet humans could never expand their capacity for love to match her divine vastness. This mismatch was inevitable, built into the relationship between creator and created. Sylvian could have avoided disappointment only by never caring about reciprocation, by accepting that her love would flow in one direction. But she could not accept that limitation, could not bear the loneliness of unrequited affection on cosmic scale. So she tried to change humanity to fit her needs, and when that failed, she departed heartbroken. Understanding Sylvian as representing not benevolent maternal care, but obsessive, possessive love provides essential context for interpreting her role in Fear and Hunger's mythology. She is not evil, but neither is she the nurturing mother figure her imagery suggests. She is a being whose affection proved too intense, too demanding, too warping for her beloved children to safely receive. Her gifts come with hidden costs. Her healing degrades the mind. Her magic warps the body. Her rituals transform humans into grotesque unified beings. Yet she genuinely loves her creation, and her departure stemmed from pain rather than malice. She is perhaps the most tragic of the old gods, a mother who wanted nothing more than to be loved by her children, yet found them incapable of the love she required. Among the old gods, Rher stands apart as perhaps the most actively malevolent toward humanity, or at least the most comprehensible in his antagonism. Known as the Trickster moon god, Rher embodies deception, madness, truth, and jealous protection of divine supremacy. Unlike Gro-goroth and Sylvian, who departed due to disappointment with humanity's limitations, Rher's continued observation of mankind stems from active hostility toward mortal ambitions of godhood. He represents the divine will to maintain the established order, the refusal to share power with beings he considers inherently inferior. Rher's mythology presents him as one of the last old gods to still observe mankind, though even he has ultimately departed, leaving only traces of his power behind. His runic symbol is described in various sources, with some depicting it as two spheres and an omega symbol interlocked with a dot inside the omega, while others show three circles with two above one. This variation in iconography could reflect how different cultures interpret the moon god's symbol, or perhaps Rher possesses multiple sigils representing different aspects of his nature. The moon itself serves as his primary symbol, appropriate for a god who deals in illumination, revelation, and the madness that comes from seeing too much truth. The core of Rher's mythology centers on his jealous nature. He would not share godhood and the world order with humans and the new gods because he fundamentally believes men should not have the same rights as true gods. This prejudice drives all of Rher's schemes and manipulations throughout history. While other old gods departed due to disappointment or heartbreak, Rher maintains active hostility. He has many ploys to diminish the influence of the new gods, though his motivations seem incomprehensible even to other divine beings. What drives Rher's obsessive need to prevent human ascension? What makes him so determined to maintain the divine hierarchy despite his fellow old gods' indifference? The answers lie in Rher's unique relationship with truth and madness. In the most ancient writings, Rher is depicted as the god of the insane and those who have succumbed to madness. His blessing to humanity is his moonlight, which uncovers truth beneath human filth. This creates a fascinating paradox. Rher, master of trickery and deception, simultaneously represents truth and revelation. His moonlight illuminates reality, strips away comfortable illusions, reveals what lurks beneath the surface of civilized life. Yet this revelation drives mortals insane because human minds cannot process the truths Rher reveals. The god appears to believe that forcing humans to confront reality will demonstrate their unsuitability for godhood, will prove that mortals cannot handle the responsibility and knowledge that divine power demands. Engraving Rher's sigil onto one's face increases mental capacity, allowing the bearer to know more without going completely insane from that knowledge. This suggests that Rher's truth, while maddening, can be weathered by those strong or desperate enough to accept it. Yet, the price remains severe. The moon-scorch infliction, caused by exposure to Rher's influence during the festival of Termina, transforms humans into monstrous versions of themselves, physical manifestations of their inner truths and fears made horrifically real. Those touched by Rher's moonlight either succumb to transformation or maintain sanity only through immense willpower. Either outcome demonstrates the god's point: humanity is too fragile for divinity, too easily corrupted by truth, too weak to maintain self in face of cosmic reality. Rher employs several servants to execute his will on the mortal plane. The Lady of Moon and Pocket Cat serve as his primary agents, both dedicated to killing children as a means of preventing humanity's ascension. The logic behind child murder stems from how new gods can be created. Alll-mer, the first human to achieve power rivaling the old gods, was born half-divine through unusual parentage. If children with divine ancestry could be eliminated before they matured and achieved their potential, humanity's path to godhood would be blocked. This makes Pocket Cat a true monster in the setting, a bogeyman figure from children's stories who is revealed as divine assassin targeting youth with godly potential. The Festival of Termina represents Rher's most elaborate scheme to diminish humanity and the new gods. This horrific battle royale brings 14 contestants to the town of Primordial to participate in what is ostensibly a divine competition. The true purpose remains unclear, described only as offering a peek at grandeur and a chance to reach for illustrious heights. Yet the festival primarily serves to spill blood, create suffering, and demonstrate human weakness through forced violence and degradation. Rher's influence transforms Primordial's population into moon-scorched abominations, creating a nightmare realm where sanity proves fleeting and survival demands embracing one's darkest impulses. However, a crucial revelation in fear and hunger. Termina complicates Rher's role. It is eventually revealed that Rher has departed from the world like the other old gods, and that his servant Perkele has been using the traces of Rher's power as a decoy while actually serving a different deity entirely, the Sulfur God. This twist suggests that even Rher's plots and schemes may have been co-opted or manipulated, that the moon god's festivals may now serve purposes unrelated to his original intentions. The distinction between Rher's true will and actions taken in his name by servants pursuing their own agendas becomes impossible to untangle. The physical manifestation of Rher, or his traces, encountered atop the hollow tower, presents an otherworldly horror. 2 rings of eyes swirl around a central form, imagery reminiscent of the Ophanim, or throne angels from Jewish and Christian mysticism. Celestial beings described as eye-covered wheels, or whirlwinds. This design choice emphasizes Rher's alien nature, a being whose very appearance defies human comprehension. The battle against Rher's traces proves extraordinarily difficult, and even victory may not represent true defeat. The god becomes bored rather than destroyed, eventually allowing the survivor to leave Prihevel. This suggests that Rher views mortals as entertainment or test subjects rather than genuine threats, beings whose struggles amuse him but pose no real danger to his supremacy. The relationship between Rher and truth creates one of fear and hunger's most disturbing philosophical quandaries. If Rher, master of deception, simultaneously represents truth and revelation, what does this say about the nature of truth itself? Perhaps truth is inherently maddening, reality's actual structure too horrific for comfortable human existence. Perhaps the lies and illusions that civilization constructs serve necessary psychological function, protecting mortals from truths that would break them. Rher's moonlight tears away these protective lies, forcing humans to confront reality in its cosmic horror. The god may genuinely believe he is helping humanity by revealing truth, even as that revelation drives them mad and proves their unsuitability for divine power. Rher's failure, or supposed failure, comes in the form of the god of fear and hunger's birth. Despite Rher's servants attempting to prevent it, despite his schemes to stop new god Nilvan's plan, the daughter of Nilvan and Lagarde successfully reached the altar of darkness and ascended to become an entity rivaling the old gods themselves. This represents a devastating blow to Rher's agenda, proof that despite his machinations, humanity could produce a being powerful enough to challenge the divine order. Yet it remains uncertain whether this truly represents Rher's defeat or merely another layer in his incomprehensible plans. Perhaps the moon god wanted this outcome all along, orchestrating events in ways that not even the new gods could understand. The worship of Rher in the modern era appears minimal compared to other old gods. Few actively venerate the trickster moon god, though his influence permeates events through his servants and the traces of his power. This lack of formal worship may stem from Rher's nature as revelation. Truth needs no church or ritual to manifest. It simply is. Or perhaps Rher deliberately avoids cultivating widespread worship because organized religion would limit his ability to operate through deception and schemes. A god of tricks maintains more freedom when unburdened by formal cult structures and expectations. The moon's symbolic association with Rher carries layers of meaning. The moon illuminates darkness, reveals what sunlight hides, transforms familiar landscapes into alien territories. The moon affects tides, influences cycles, drives certain creatures and legends into madness. The moon serves as imperfect mirror of the sun, reflecting light rather than generating it, suggesting Rher may be reflection or corruption of some greater truth or deity. These lunar associations make Rher simultaneously source of revelation and fundamental deceiver, illuminator and obscurer, guide and destroyer. He is paradox made divine, trickster who reveals truth, jealous god who obsesses over beings he considers inferior. Understanding Rher requires accepting apparent contradictions. He is departed, yet still observing. His servants use his power for their own ends, yet carry out purposes that may align with his original intentions. He represents both truth and madness, revelation and deception, protection of divine order, and active cruelty toward mortals. Perhaps these contradictions are intentional, reflections of Rher's trickster nature, where nothing is quite what it seems, and even the god's departure may be illusion or misdirection. In a cosmology where gods wear human skins and traces possess consciousness, the line between present and absent becomes meaningless. Rher may have departed while simultaneously remaining more active than any other old god through the persistence of his schemes and the continued influence of his moonlight. The legacy of Rher shapes fear and hunger's world through institutionalized divine antagonism toward human ambition. While other old gods departed due to disappointment or heartbreak, Rher's jealous nature established active opposition to mortal ascension. His servants hunt those who might achieve godhood. His festivals create bloodbaths that demonstrate human weakness and depravity. His moonlight reveals truths that drive mortals mad. Through these mechanisms, Rher ensures that the path to divinity remains treacherous, that any human who claims godlike power must first prove themselves against trials designed specifically to break them. Whether this represents malice, wisdom, or incomprehensible alien purpose remains forever ambiguous in true Rher fashion. Among the old gods of fear and hunger, perhaps none remains more mysterious and unknowable than the god of the depths, an ancient entity worshipped by outcasts, vermin, and those consigned to eternal darkness. This deity represents aspects of existence that humanity finds revolting: the depths of shadow, where consciousness fades, where higher thought becomes impossible, where only base existence remains. Unlike the other old gods whose domains prove comprehensible if terrifying, the god of the depths embodies pure otherness, an entity so alien that even its worshippers lack self-awareness and higher intelligence. The god of the depths is not as prevalent as most other old gods, like Gro-goroth or Sylvian. Like Rher, this deity had scant few followers, and its actions were shrouded in mystery even before departure from the active world. What worshippers existed were exclusively beings that humanity regards as lesser: insects such as cockroaches, scarabs, and spiders, mindless creatures like cave-dwellers who lost human intelligence through generations in darkness, and the various horrific entities that dwell in the deepest parts of the dungeons of fear and hunger. According to the warrior Ragnvaldr, the god of the depths is worshipped by those who are forsaken and forgotten, beings rejected by or excluded from normal society. The god of the depths' role extends beyond mere patron of outcasts. This deity is responsible for the layout of the dungeons themselves, creating an ever-changing maze designed to challenge visitors. The dungeons shift and transform, corridors appearing and disappearing, rooms rearranging themselves according to incomprehensible logic. This suggests the god of the depths possesses or possessed power over space itself, ability to manipulate physical reality in ways that defy conventional understanding. The dungeon becomes extension of the god, a living trap or testing ground whose architecture reflects the deity's alien consciousness. From bits of scattered information and encounters with the god's followers, a picture emerges of a being that encompasses the idea of revulsion and inescapable darkness. The god of the depths represents everything humans find disgusting and fear: the crawling things, the spaces where light never reaches, the decay and degradation of form and consciousness. This deity embodies not natural cycles like Gro-goroth's destruction or Sylvian's creation, but something deeper and more primal: the void that exists beneath and beyond ordered existence, the darkness that swallows everything, eventually regardless of divine intervention. The followers and creatures associated with the god of the depths reflect the deity's revolting nature. They include cockroaches and other insects that feed on refuse, the cockroach king who rules over vermin swarms, spiders that dwell in shadows and inspire instinctive human fear, cave dwellers who lost humanity through generations underground, body snatchers that steal corpses for unknown purposes, and various other entities described as mindless servants. These creatures share common characteristics of operating in darkness, lacking complex thought or self-awareness, existing in states that civilized humans find horrifying. They are forgotten things, rejected things, things that scurry and crawl and hide from the light. Despite the god's focus on outcasts and vermin, historical records suggest human worshippers once existed. The hermit mages of the south, a mysterious sect, held the god of the depths in high esteem. These reclusive practitioners possessed rare ability to imbue rings with life-draining magic, suggesting deep connection to the god's death-adjacent domains. Ancient folklore also speaks of the Maiden of the Depths, a human woman supposedly chosen as bride to the god of the depths. What became of her remains unknown, but her story hints at historical periods when the deity maintained more direct contact with humanity before fading into obscurity. Unlike other old gods who exist as abstract forces or departed presences, the god of the depths maintains physical form within the dungeon. The deity's massive body lies dormant in the altar of darkness on level 6, a corpse of staggering scale that serves as both geography and grave. Within this body lies the gauntlet, described as a way to the very bottom of the dungeons, a path that leads through the god's interior to the darkest depths of existence. To enter the gauntlet, one must destroy the god's 3 hearts located in different areas of the dungeon. Only after these organs are destroyed does the deity's mouth open, granting access to its interior and the trials that wait within. The 3 hearts of the god of the depths are hidden in specific locations. One can be found on level 7 in the area where Lagarde is imprisoned. Another lies at the bottom of the tree dungeon in the thicket. The 3rd heart resides at the end of the present-day Golden Temple, where the aged Francóis can be found. These locations span the dungeon's geography, suggesting the god's essence permeates the entire structure. Destroying these hearts does not truly kill the deity, for it is stated repeatedly that old gods never truly perish. Instead, the destruction creates specific conditions, opening the god's mouth and allowing access to spaces that were previously sealed. The fate of the god of the depths proves significant to Fear and Hunger's cosmology. In the year 1590, one of the 4 heroes venturing through the dungeon destroyed all 3 hearts, effectively killing the deity in physical sense, if not in existential one. The god's body was then used as a vessel for something unprecedented, the birth of a new divine being. When the girl who would become the god of fear and hunger reached the altar of darkness within the deity's corpse, she underwent transformation that consumed the old god's remaining essence. As an old god cannot truly die, aspects of the god of the depths persist within the newly born ascended deity, particularly dominion over vermin, insects, and creatures of darkness. This consumption and transformation raises fascinating questions about divine succession and the nature of godhood in the Fear and Hunger universe. The god of the depths, an ancient primordial entity, was effectively cannibalized to fuel a new god's birth. This suggests that divine essence can be transferred, that older gods can be consumed or absorbed to create new beings with inherited traits and domains. The god of fear and hunger inherits mastery over insects and vermin from the god of the depths, maintaining connection to that aspect of the old deity, even as she establishes her own identity and purpose. The modern persistence of the god of the depths' influence appears primarily through beekeepers, described as the sole remnants of the deity's enduring power, symbolizing the god's last remaining aspect, insects. These practitioners maintain traditions and knowledge tied to the departed god, keeping some fragment of worship alive. Yet even this limited following pales compared to what other old gods maintain. The god of the depths remains largely forgotten, its worship relegated to history and its power absorbed into newer divine entities. This represents ultimate fate of gods who embody concepts humans find revolting, forgotten, and absorbed, leaving barely a trace beyond the vermin that continue their mindless existence. The god of the depths' gender proves ambiguous, referred to by both male and female pronouns in different sources. This ambiguity likely stems from different interpretations within the mythology, various cultures and cults understanding the deity through their own frameworks. The game maintains this neutrality deliberately, suggesting that conventional concepts of gender may not apply to beings of such alien nature. The God of the depths simply is, beyond human categories and definitions, comprehensible only through its effects and domains, rather than through any conventional understanding of personhood or identity. The skill mastery over insects, affiliated with the God of the depths, allows practitioners to communicate with vermin and command them. This represents one of few lasting magical traditions tied to the deity, a practical application of the god's influence that persists despite widespread loss of knowledge about the entity itself. Those who develop this mastery gain ability to speak with creatures most humans dismiss as mindless, revealing complexity and consciousness where others see only instinct. Whether this represents the vermin developing intelligence through divine connection, or humans learning to perceive awareness that was always present, remains ambiguous, another mystery surrounding the God of the depths. The Cube of the Depths, an artifact sacred to the deity, originates from Vinland and possesses ability to activate the Beacon of the Depths. These devices enable travelers to move between past and present versions of Mahabre, suggesting the God of the Depths had mastery over time as well as space. This temporal connection proves ironic, given the deity embodies darkness and base existence, the very bottom of consciousness. Yet even in degradation and darkness, the god controlled fundamental aspects of reality's structure, wielding powers over space and time that most beings could never comprehend. The cube became object of desire for Lagarde and others seeking ascension, its connection to the God of the depths making it essential tool for those attempting to reach Mahabre and claim divine power. Understanding the God of the depths requires accepting unknowability as central characteristic. This deity embodies aspects of existence that resist comprehension, darkness so complete that consciousness dissolves, depth so profound that meaning itself becomes lost. The god's worshippers lack self-awareness. Its domain inspires revulsion. Its very nature proves antithetical to human understanding. Yet it was and remains a fundamental force in fear and hunger's cosmology, a deity whose death and consumption enabled new divinity to emerge, whose essence persists through inheritance and trace influence. The God of the depths represents perhaps the ultimate expression of the old god's alienness. While Gro-goroth, Sylvian, and even Rher operate according to principles humans can at least comprehend, if not accept, the God of the depths exists beyond such frameworks. It is not destruction or creation, not love or hate, not truth or deception. It simply is darkness, depth, the void beneath existence where nothing human survives. That such a being could be worshipped, could grant power, could serve as vessel for new divinity, demonstrates the cosmic horror at fear and hunger's core. We exist in a universe where the most alien and incomprehensible forces remain divine, where godhood has nothing to do with morality or comprehensibility, where power flows from sources that should rightfully drive mortals mad merely to contemplate. From the union of fear and hunger's two most fundamental old gods, emerged a deity who embodies their combined principles made manifest in the natural world. Vinushka, the god of nature, represents the offspring of Gro-goroth and Sylvian, destruction and creation united in eternal cycle. Originally known as Ninush, according to some accounts, particularly the unedited version of the Skin Bible written by Enki and Karian, this deity encapsulates how nature itself operates through simultaneous birth and death, growth and decay, flourishing and devastation. Vinushka's introduction occurs in Fear and Hunger to Termina, making this god a relatively late addition to the explicitly presented mythology, though likely existing in the world's deep history. The new gods, when asked about Vinushka, explain that this old god came to be from the union of Sylvian and Gro-goroth. making Vinushka synonymous with nature itself. The god's appearance changes according to the region of the world where manifestation occurs, just as nature appears in different forms around the world. A volcano in one region, serene grassland in another, dense jungle in a third. Vinushka's form reflects local environment, emphasizing the god's role as nature's living embodiment rather than abstract principle. The symbol associated with Vinushka depicts a swirling maelstrom, representing the ever-changing state within nature itself. This imagery captures the god's volatile temperament, described as shifting from fiery raging volcano to serene grassland where gentle wind lulls one to sleep. Like nature's manifestations, Vinushka can be nurturing or destructive, calm or catastrophic, life-giving or deadly. This volatility makes the deity unpredictable and dangerous, embodying how nature remains fundamentally indifferent to human needs or desires, while possessing power to nurture or annihilate entire civilizations. Vinushka's relationship with humanity proves complex and tragic, according to Enki and Karian's unedited writings. The ancient tribes of humanity once lived in symbiosis with nature, accepting its cycles of destruction and creation, working within rather than against natural systems. But as civilization developed, people grew greedy and hostile toward the land they settled. They ravaged nature to make room for cities and fields, extracting resources without regard for balance or sustainability. As humanity grew greedy and hostile, so did Vinushka. The god's temperament shifted to match human treatment of the natural world, becoming aggressive and antagonistic in response to civilization's exploitation. This led to a long war between Vinushka and humanity, a conflict where each side fought to determine who would become master and who would become slave. According to Enki's unedited account, this war resulted in Vinushka's demise, a shocking claim given that old gods supposedly never truly perish. For all intents and purposes, Enki declares, nature is dead. Vinushka died by human hands. From this grievous realization comes the name itself, Vinushka meaning guilt, representing humanity's great guilt for murdering the god of nature. The original name Ninush was replaced post-death, the name change acknowledging the crime committed against the natural world. If Enki's account proves accurate, Vinushka's death represents unprecedented catastrophe in the cosmology. An old god, primordial force of existence itself, destroyed by mortal action. The implications stagger the imagination. If humans could kill the god of nature, what does this say about the supposed supremacy of the old gods? How could beings capable of destroying fundamental divine entities remain subservient to the remaining gods? Yet Enki's account contradicts other information, suggesting Vinushka remains active, or at least retains traces capable of influence. This discrepancy may stem from the edited version of the Skin Bible distributed by the Vatican, which makes no mention of Vinushka's death, and instead emphasizes harmony between the god and humanity. The censorship and contradiction surrounding Vinushka's status creates deliberate ambiguity. Is nature truly dead, killed by human exploitation, with only faint traces lingering in desperate search for the murdered god? Or does Vinushka persist, perhaps weakened but still present, still capable of manifestation and influence? The game refuses definitive answer, leaving players to navigate competing narratives and determine their own interpretation. This mirrors real-world debates about humanity's relationship with nature, questions about whether we have irrevocably damaged natural systems, or whether restoration and balance remain achievable. Totems associated with Vinushka appear throughout the world, described in Enki's account as desperately searching for the murdered god in vain. These may represent manifestations of human guilt, physical expressions of collective awareness that something irreplaceable has been lost. The totems serve as connection points for Vinushka's magic and influence, places where the god's power can still be accessed despite death or departure. Their continued existence suggests that even if Vinushka truly died, the concept of nature itself persists, and with it, some fragment of the deity's essence. The magic and abilities associated with Vinushka reflect the god's dual nature, both creative and destructive. Spells tied to this deity include pyromancy trick, invoking fire's transformative power, and photosynthesis, drawing life-giving energy from light. Heartflower and Scorched Earth require affinity with both Sylvian and Gro-goroth, respectively, acknowledging Vinushka's parentage and inherited domains. These abilities demonstrate how the god of nature encompasses opposing forces simultaneously: fire that destroys and renews, light that sustains life, flowers that bloom from scorched earth. Nature operates through cycles where death feeds life, destruction enables creation, endings become beginnings. The relationship between Vinushka and humanity, as presented in official Vatican-approved texts, emphasizes similarities and harmony. Both were reared by Sylvian, making humans and nature siblings in divine sense. Both suckled from Sylvian's many bosoms, receiving sustenance from the same maternal source. This framing positions nature and humanity as equals rather than master and slave, suggesting potential for cooperation and mutual thriving. Yet this idealized view contradicts Enki's unedited account of war and murder, creating tension between official doctrine and alternative interpretations of history. Vinushka and Alll-mer the Ascended One are considered equal according to some texts, neither standing taller than the other. This places the god of nature on the same level as humanity's representative in divine hierarchy, suggesting balance between natural and human realms. What belongs to Vinushka is for mankind to reap, just as nature reaps humanity's old and weary. This reciprocal relationship implies mutual dependence, neither nature nor humanity capable of existing in isolation, each requiring the other for completion and continuation. Yet this balance has clearly been disrupted, whether through Vinushka's death or departure, through human exploitation, or through fundamental incompatibility between civilized ambition and natural cycles. The Iki Turso, giant tree creatures encountered in fear and hunger. 2. Termina, maintain some relationship with Vinushka that even the new gods cannot explain. One such creature, identified as a half-god, claims to be waiting for Vinushka, suggesting expectation of the deity's return or manifestation. This connection to tree beings makes sense given Vinushka's nature domain, but the specific dynamics remain mysterious. Are the Iki Turso servants, offspring, or something else entirely? Do they wait for a god they know will never return, or does Vinushka's continued existence in some form justify their vigil? The ambiguity persists, another layer of mystery surrounding this volatile deity. The name Vinushka itself draws obvious parallel to the Hindu god Vishnu, particularly in the context of the Trinity, including Brahma, the creator, and Shiva, the destroyer. Vishnu serves as the preserver, maintaining balance between creation and destruction through various avatars and incarnations. This parallel suggests Vinushka occupies similar role in fear and hunger's cosmology, preserving balance between Gro-goroth's destruction and Sylvian's creation, manifesting in different forms as circumstances require. The god's volatile temperament and ever-changing appearance mirror Vishnu's avatar system, with Vinushka adapting to circumstance and location while maintaining fundamental nature as preserver of cycles. The owl cultists encountered in Termina may represent a sect of Vinushka followers, given their integration with natural environments, their attire mimicking natural camouflage, and their practice of harnessing animal spirits. Like Pocket Cat, whose animal mask melded with his face, The owl cultists' masks have fused with their heads, suggesting deep commitment to or transformation by their worship. If these cultists do serve Vinushka, they represent active worship in the modern era, proof that the god maintains relevance despite death or departure. Their existence in forests away from civilization reflects the god's domain, natural spaces resisting human development. The theological questions surrounding Vinushka center on responsibility and guilt. If humanity truly murdered the god of nature, what does this mean for the future of both species? Can humans survive in a world where nature itself is dead or departed? Does the guilt that supposedly inspired Vinushka's name represent potential for redemption, or merely acknowledgement of irreversible crime? The various interpretations of Vinushka's status, from death to departure to continued existence, reflect real-world debates about environmental destruction and humanity's relationship with natural systems. The god becomes metaphor for nature itself, something humans depend upon, yet consistently damage, something that may be murdered, yet persists through traces and memories. Understanding Vinushka requires accepting paradox as fundamental principle. The god is both creator and destroyer, nurturing and devastating, alive and dead, present and absent. This reflects nature itself, which operates through contradictions and cycles that defy simple categorization. Life feeds on death, destruction enables renewal, endings become beginnings. Vinushka embodies these paradoxes divinely, a being whose very existence challenges binary thinking. The god teaches that nature cannot be controlled or mastered, only understood through acceptance of its volatile, contradictory, ultimately amoral character. Nature does not care about human survival or suffering. It simply cycles endlessly, destroying and creating, whether gods guide it or whether they lie dead and mourned by desperate searching totems. Among all divine beings in fear and hunger, Alll-mer occupies a unique position. He is not an old god born from the green hue, not a new god who sat upon the throne of ascension, but rather the first ascended god, a being who achieved divinity, rivaling the old gods themselves through circumstances that blur the line between mortal and divine. His story marks the beginning of humanity's challenge to the established divine order, the moment when mortal ambition first successfully grasped godlike power, threatening the supremacy of the ancient entities who had ruled unchallenged since creation. Alll-mer was born in Jataya within the eastern sanctuaries, raised by a virgin mother and sired by what is described as a false god. This unusual parentage immediately sets Alll-mer apart from ordinary humans. He possessed divine ancestry from birth, some spark of godhood inherited from his otherworldly father that made him suitable vessel for full ascension. The circumstances of his conception mirror the story of Jesus Christ, another figure born to virgin, mother and divine father, another who gathered 12 apostles to spread teaching and unify people, another who was crucified by corrupt authorities before rising to transcendent existence. Yet Alll-mer's path diverges sharply from Christ's in crucial ways. According to Enki Ankarian's alternative origin story, Alll-mer was not naturally born, but created by a master architect named Vitruvia. After noticing imperfections in her previous designs and receiving orders from Gro-goroth, Vitruvia crafted Alll-mer as the ultimate human being, a perfect specimen free from the flaws that marred normal humanity. This version presents Alll-mer as artificial construct rather than naturally born hybrid, designed deliberately as bridge between mortal and divine realms. Whether both origin stories hold truth simultaneously, or whether they represent competing mythologies remains unclear. Another example of how fear and hunger refuses singular definitive answers. Alll-mer's early life and gathering of apostles proceeded according to traditional messianic narrative. He emerged as charismatic leader during a time when kingdoms rotted without divine guidance, when grand values had been displaced by defiled principles and practices. The old gods had departed, leaving humanity to struggle without supernatural oversight. Into this void stepped Alll-mer, claiming ability to save mankind and establish new world order. He gathered 12 apostles to spread his teachings and attempted to bring down corrupt kings and sultans who oppressed the common people. The authorities responded predictably to this threat. They captured Alll-mer and crucified him, executing the would-be savior in manner designed to demonstrate divine abandonment. Yet death proved not the end, but rather the beginning of Alll-mer's true transformation. The crucifixion served as catalyst, the suffering and sacrifice enabling his ascension into Mahabre, the city of the gods. Here Alll-mer achieved something unprecedented, a mortal becoming god through unique circumstances, rather than sitting upon the throne of ascension like later new gods would. His divinity came through combination of divine ancestry, perfect design or natural birth, and the transformative power of martyrdom. The year of Alll-mer's death and ascension became Year Zero, the starting point for a new calendar that measures all subsequent history. This demonstrates the profound impact of his transformation on human civilization. Before Alll-mer, time was measured differently. After his ascension, history itself reorganized around his achievement, acknowledging that something fundamental had changed in the relationship between mortal and divine realms. A human had claimed godhood and survived, establishing template others would eventually follow. After ascending, Alll-mer returned to his 12 weeping apostles 3 days after his death, again mirroring Christ's resurrection. But unlike Christ, who preached forgiveness and peace, Alll-mer employed his newfound divine power to murder the corrupt kings and sultans who had crucified him. This violent revenge represents major departure from traditional messianic narrative. Alll-mer did not forgive his executioners or turn the other cheek. He killed them, using divine might to tear down the old order through force rather than moral persuasion. This establishes Alll-mer as what one might call Jesus if Jesus solved problems with violence, a divine being committed to justice, but willing to achieve it through bloodshed. The new world order established by Alll-mer placed him at the center of worship, creating a religious system that would dominate for centuries. Churches dedicated to Alll-mer appear throughout the world, with Preheville's Church of Alll-mer demonstrating his continued relevance even in the 20th century. His symbol, the cross upon which he died, became sacred icon representing sacrifice, transformation, and the bridge between mortal and divine. His teachings, codified by apostles and later theologians, shaped moral frameworks and social structures across civilizations. Alll-mer, the Ascended One, became not merely a god, but the god, the primary object of worship for mainstream society in Fear and Hunger's world. Yet Alll-mer's ascension came with hidden cost that would only become apparent later. When he carved his idol and ascended to godhood, he cast his subconscious, hatred-filled parts deep into the sulfur pits. This dark aspect of his psyche, rejected and expelled to enable his transformation, did not simply disappear. Instead, it took form as the Sulfur God, a separate entity embodying everything Alll-mer suppressed to achieve divinity. The Sulfur God becomes Alll-mer's shadow self, his antithesis, representing the rage, hatred, and darkness that even the most perfect human cannot entirely transcend. This split creates ongoing conflict, as the Sulfur God and its cult work to undermine or co-opt events supposedly orchestrated by other deities. The mortal remains of Alll-mer lie in an ancient tomb near Mahabre, the city where he ascended. This creates interesting theological question. If Alll-mer became fully divine, why does his body remain? Perhaps ascension does not involve physical transformation, but rather consciousness separating from matter. Perhaps the body serves as anchor, connection between divine realm and physical world, ensuring Alll-mer cannot entirely abandon humanity. Or perhaps the remains serve as pilgrimage site, holy relics that enable followers to connect with their God through proximity to his earthly form. The persistence of the corpse suggests that even in godhood, Alll-mer retains connection to human existence in ways the old gods never maintained. The relationship between Alll-mer and the old gods proves complex. His ascension worried them, particularly Rher, who views any human achievement of godhood as threat to divine supremacy. Yet Alll-mer achieved power rivaling the ancient entities, becoming true peer rather than subordinate. This makes him, along with the god of fear and hunger, one of only 2 humans to reach old god-level divinity. The ascended gods represent new classification, beings who bridge the gap between new gods who remain ultimately limited and old gods who embody fundamental cosmic principles. Alll-mer demonstrated that, with correct circumstances, divine ancestry, perfect design, meaningful sacrifice, a mortal could achieve true godhood rather than the compromised version offered by the throne of ascension. The comparison between Alll-mer and Vinushka proves significant. Some texts describe them as equals, neither standing taller, representing balance between humanity and nature. This suggests Alll-mer serves as humanity's champion in divine realm, advocating for mortal interests just as Vinushka embodies natural cycles. Yet this equality may be illusion or aspiration rather than reality. The old gods clearly possess power beyond what Alll-mer wields, and even his impressive divinity operates within frameworks established by more ancient entities. Perhaps the equality refers to potential rather than actual power, suggesting humans could match old gods if circumstances aligned correctly. The cult of Alll-mer greatly surpasses other religious movements by the time of fear and hunger to Termina. His churches dominate religious landscape. His teachings form basis of mainstream morality. His symbol marks sacred spaces throughout the world. This success stems partly from Alll-mer offering hope, demonstrating that humans could overcome limitations and achieve transcendence. Unlike the old gods who departed disappointed, Alll-mer remained engaged with humanity, or at least his followers believed he did. The faith he established provided moral framework, sense of purpose, and promise of divine favor for those who lived according to his teachings. Yet the Church of Alll-mer, like most religious institutions in fear and hunger, proves deeply corrupt. The basement of Preavil's church contains evidence of mass human sacrifice rituals, otherworldly monsters, and worship of old gods alongside the officially sanctioned deity. This corruption suggests that Alll-mer's influence may be more limited than his followers believe, that his church has been co-opted by forces he cannot or will not control. Perhaps achieving godhood did not grant Alll-mer ability to perfect his followers or prevent institutional corruption. Perhaps divine power proves insufficient for fundamentally transforming human nature. Alll-mer's magic and abilities focus on balance and protection rather than raw offensive or creative power. His spells tend toward defensive application, protecting worshippers rather than smiting enemies, maintaining equilibrium rather than tipping scales toward particular outcome. This reflects his role as preserver of the new order he established, a god committed to maintaining stability and protecting his followers from the chaos that consumed the world before his ascension. Yet this defensive posture may indicate limitation, suggesting Alll-mer lacks the raw power to actively reshape reality the way old gods can. The Mourning One, frequently depicted in statues throughout churches of Alll-mer, particularly in Prehevil, represents a figure of great significance whose exact relationship to Alll-mer remains unclear. This entity is described as Saint, one of the few figures to hold such title in the series. The Morning One appears as shrouded figure with hood obscuring everything except face and hands, the space within the hood shown as blank black void. Whether the Morning One represents aspect of Alll-mer, a separate entity who aided his mission, or something else entirely, remains ambiguous. But the prominence of these statues in Alll-mer's churches suggests deep connection between the two figures. Understanding Alll-mer requires recognizing him as simultaneously genuine divinity and propaganda construct. He achieved true godhood, his power is real, his ascension genuinely transcended mortal limitations. Yet the narrative surrounding him, the Christ-like biography, the perfect savior story, feels manufactured to inspire devotion and legitimize the religious order built in his name. Both things can be true. Alll-mer may be genuinely divine, while the specific stories about him serve political and social control functions. This duality makes him more complex and interesting than simple savior or false prophet, presenting deity who occupies ambiguous space between authentic transcendence and mythologized propaganda. The legacy of Alll-mer shapes all subsequent attempts at human divinity. He proved ascension possible, that mortals could genuinely achieve godhood rather than merely claiming empty titles. The fellowship who later sought divinity followed template Alll-mer established, venturing into Mahabre seeking the gods, demanding rights of self-governance, attempting to claim divine power for themselves. Lagard's obsessive quest for godhood drew inspiration from Alll-mer's success. The god of fear and hunger's birth followed similar pattern, mortal with divine ancestry, transcending into true godhood. Alll-mer opened door that could never be fully closed again, demonstrating to all subsequent generations that the supposedly eternal hierarchy separating gods and mortals was not inviolable. In the year 809 following Alll-mer's ascension, 5 individuals formed a fellowship with audacious purpose. The kingdoms of the world were rotting away, grand values mankind once aimed for had been displaced by defiled principles and practices, and the old gods remained absent, offering no guidance during times of great peril. Into this moral and spiritual vacuum stepped Francóis, Nilvan, Valteil, Ronn Chambara, and the one who would become known as the Forgotten One, Nosramus. Together they embarked on a journey to Mahabre, the ancient city of the gods, determined to demand the rights of self-governance for humanity and claim divine power for themselves. The fellowship's formation represents a pivotal moment in fear and hunger's history, marking when mortals collectively decided that waiting for divine intervention or guidance had failed, that humanity must seize control of its own destiny, even if that meant challenging the departed gods themselves. Each member brought unique perspective and motivation. Francóis sought dominance, believing strength and unification of warring lands justified pursuit of greater power. Nilvan, beautiful and empathetic, believed in humanity's endless potential, convinced that persistence and effort could achieve anything. Valteil, the scholarly dark priest, pursued enlightenment and knowledge above all else. Ronn Chambara, a poet who believed true art arose only from pain and suffering, sought to embody torment itself. And Nosramus, whose story bears no listeners, whose name would be deliberately forgotten, joined the quest only to turn away when he understood its true nature. The journey to Mahabre proved arduous and revelatory. The ancient city existed as Nexus Point, a place where multiple planes of existence intersected, where mortals could potentially meet their makers. The fellowship encountered obstacles designed to test their worthiness, trials that pushed them to limits and beyond. They faced guardians, solved puzzles, survived horrors that would break lesser individuals. Throughout this gauntlet, they discovered evidence that they were not the first to attempt this path, that many others had ventured into Mahabri seeking divinity over the centuries. The crucial revelation came when the Fellowship penetrated deep enough into Mahabri to learn the truth about godhood. The old gods, or perhaps the mechanisms they established before departing, revealed that the Fellowship was not the first group to complete these trials and sit upon the throne of ascension. Others had claimed the title of new god before them, ruling over humanity for centuries before being replaced by subsequent ascensions. More devastating still, the old gods made clear that becoming a new god would not grant power sufficient to rival the ancient entities themselves. The new gods were and would remain subordinate to the old gods, puppets dancing on strings, rulers of humanity, but ultimately powerless to change the fundamental cosmic order. This revelation broke Nosramus. He understood that ascending to godhood would not save humanity, but merely perpetuate the cycle, creating new divine rulers who would eventually be replaced just as their predecessors had been. Nothing would fundamentally change. Humanity would remain trapped in patterns established by the old gods, doomed to repeat the same failures generation after generation. So Nosramus renounced his claim to the throne of ascension, becoming the Forgotten One, the fifth member whose story bears no listeners, whose wisdom in refusing godhood earned him only obscurity. The other four members of the Fellowship chose differently. Despite knowing they would be mere replacements for previous new gods, despite understanding their power would never rival the old gods, they sat upon the throne of ascension and claimed divinity. Perhaps they believed partial godhood was better than mortality. Perhaps they hoped to find ways around the limitations once they achieved divine perspective. Perhaps they simply could not abandon their quest after coming so far and sacrificing so much. Whatever their reasoning, Francóis became the dominating one. Nilvan became the endless one. Valteil became the enlightened one, and Ronn Chambara became the tormented one. Humanity gained new gods to worship and follow, but nothing fundamental changed. Francóis, the dominating one, took up residence in the Golden Temple, guarding the throne of ascension from outsiders and ruling Mahabri with iron fist. He hoped to unify the warring lands, to bring peace through strength and dominance. As a selfish deity despised by his fellow new gods who sat idly at the Grand Hall, Francóis used his goal of unification as justification for pursuing ever greater strength. He trained hunting hounds as mindless beasts that only tasted blood of victims, setting them to harass trespassers who approached the Golden Temple. His reign demonstrated how pursuit of dominance, even for supposedly noble purpose of unity, inevitably becomes tyrannical when wielded by being who stands above mortality and consequence. Nilvan, the Endless One, established herself in the Tower of Endless within Mahabri, espousing belief in humanity's boundless potential and the idea that anything can be achieved through perseverance and effort. While the game does not fully reveal the extent of her abilities as new god, Nilvan clearly possessed a state detached from physical reality, allowing her to transcend normal limitations and visit people in their dreams. Yet even this impressive power proved insufficient for what she wanted to accomplish. By the late 16th century, Nilvan acknowledged that her reign would eventually end, that she too would be replaced just as previous new gods had been. Desperate to maintain her eternal existence and unwilling to accept the cycle's inevitability, Nilvan searched for a way to continue beyond her natural divine lifespan. She believed Lagarde, a man prophesied to unite warring states without resorting to force, held the key to her salvation. She visited him in his dreams and bore a child with him, hoping this offspring would be humanity's beacon of hope and, crucially, a means of extending her own influence beyond the term the Throne of Ascension granted. This same child would later ascend as the god of fear and hunger, ushering in an era of progress through adversity known as the Cruel Age. Whether Nilvan's plan succeeded in extending her existence, or whether she was replaced like Alll-mer, new gods before her, remains ambiguous, though her presence in the Hall of Gods among inactive entities suggests the cycle claimed her as it claims all. Valteil, the Enlightened One, became the third new god to reside in Mahabre's grand libraries, dedicating himself to pursuit of understanding artificial life as means of bridging the gap between new gods and old gods. He believed that if new gods could create life as the old gods had done, they would prove themselves worthy of true godhood and escape the cycle. Based on the eternal clay figurines of Mahabre, Valteil attempted to create laboring beings to serve him. However, fearing his creations would outlast him, he opted to craft artificial life forms from flesh, thereby imposing limited lifespan upon them. Valteil successfully brought forth the Lords of Flies and a mechanical entity named Uterus for his pastime pleasure, though this phrase suggests the Uteri served as sex slaves for the god's enjoyment. His sexual relations with these artificial beings resulted in numerous deformed, seemingly monstrous children, with accusations suggesting he sexually abused them as well. This reveals the corruption that godhood wrought upon Valteil. What began as noble pursuit of knowledge and creation degraded into solitary perversion, the Enlightened One reduced to creating beings solely for personal gratification. By the close of the 16th century, after wielding the mantle of new god for nearly 800 years, Valteil had descended into despair. He realized that true enlightenment was an unattainable dream, that mankind had no hope because the greater scheme of things chained them inescapably. He acknowledged the wisdom of Nosremus, who resisted the throne of ascension, viewing his own ascension as a great mistake. Accepting these mistakes as integral to his personal growth, Valteil chose to hang himself, opting to await death rather than continue existing in state of realized futility. His presence in the Hall of Gods among other inactive entities confirms his reign ended, another new god replaced in the eternal cycle. Ronn Chambara the Tormented One, described as a skinless entity tormented by eternal chains for centuries, inflicts his agony upon other creatures within Mahabre's shrines. Once a mortal poet who believed that true art could only arise from pain and suffering, he clung to these principles even after ascending to godhood. As the Tormented One, Chambara embodies and spreads the suffering he believes necessary for authentic existence and creation. His form, skinless and wrapped in chains, visually represents his philosophy, pain made flesh, torment given divine authority to perpetuate itself through others. The Fellowship's reign brought stability to the world, but proved ultimately hollow. They lacked necessary power to accomplish anything truly meaningful beyond maintaining status quo. Over centuries of divine rule, they came to the same conclusion that all new gods before them had reached, that time was a cycle, that they were nothing more than puppets for the old gods to control, that their supposed divinity meant nothing in face of cosmic forces that shaped reality according to ancient, unchangeable patterns. This realization poisoned their existence, transforming what should have been ultimate achievement into prison of awareness, conscious helplessness elevated to divine scale. The fate of each fellowship member varies, though all eventually fell from active power. Francóis was apparently killed, appearing in the Hall of Gods among inactive entities by the time of Termina. Valteil hanged himself in despair after 8 centuries of futile enlightenment pursuit. Nilvan's fate remains ambiguous, though she too appears among the inactive gods, suggesting her plan to achieve eternal existence through her daughter ultimately failed or proved unnecessary. Chambara continues to exist in some capacity, spreading torment as his nature demands. Only Nosremus, the Forgotten One who refused ascension, potentially escaped the cycle entirely, though at cost of obscurity and lack of divine power. The new gods who preceded the Fellowship remain mostly unknown, faceless entities seated in the Hall of Gods, watching mortals with expressions of judgment or indifference. These beings ruled humanity during their respective eras, wielding divine authority, shaping civilization according to their visions and limitations. Each eventually fell or was replaced, joining the growing collection of inactive deities who persist in Mahabharata, but no longer directly influence the mortal realm. The Hall of Gods becomes graveyard of ambition, museum of failed transcendence, reminder that even achieving godhood guarantees neither permanence nor genuine power. One previous new god deserves specific mention, Beetle, also called Bethel Kishar, who served as god of enlightenment before Valteil and created the grand libraries where all world's knowledge could be recorded. Beetle was originally a scholar from Mesopotamia who ascended during the period after the old god's departure, but before Alll-mer's rise. His creation of the grand libraries represents significant achievement, infrastructure that persists beyond his active reign, though even this impressive legacy could not prevent his eventual replacement. Nasra, the Dark Priest, later claimed Betel's position through force, tricking and overpowering the new god to take control of the libraries and their knowledge. Nasra himself represents a fascinating figure in new god mythology. After seizing control of the grand libraries from Betel, Nasra became the new god of enlightenment, ruling the library and conducting experiments in artificial life similar to those Valteil would later pursue. Yet Nasra eventually reached the same conclusion Nosramus had reached before ascending, that becoming a new god would not change anything, would merely start a new cycle, reaching the very same conclusion. This realization filled Nasra with hatred for the new gods and their hollow divinity. He developed deep loathing for Valteil, who replaced him, commenting that the new god deserved his fate and making disturbing accusations. The Fellowship and subsequent new gods learned that the old gods had trapped them in what amounts to a time loop or perpetual cycle. New gods would rise, rule for a time, realize the futility of their position, despair, and eventually be replaced by new ascending mortals who would repeat the process. This cycle served to keep humanity perpetually under divine rule, while ensuring no mortal ever gained sufficient power to genuinely threaten the old god's supremacy. It was an elegant trap, offering just enough success to keep ambitious mortals pursuing godhood, while guaranteeing their ultimate failure to achieve anything meaningful. The theological implications prove devastating. If new gods are merely puppets, if their divine power operates within constraints established by absent old gods, what hope does humanity have for genuine self-determination? The Fellowship's story suggests that even achieving godhood does not grant true freedom or power, that the fundamental cosmic order remains unchangeable regardless of how many mortals claim divine authority. This nihilistic conclusion explains why so many new gods eventually fall into despair, why Valteil hanged himself, why Nasra developed such intense hatred for divine systems. They achieved the impossible dream only to discover it was nightmare all along. Yet the new gods serve important function despite their limitations. They provide structure, moral frameworks, and stability that anarchic world would lack. Their spells and blessings offer real benefits to worshippers. Their existence proves that mortals can achieve transcendence, even if that transcendence proves less ultimate than hoped. The cycle may be trap, but it's trap that keeps civilization from total collapse, that provides hope even when that hope is partially illusory. Perhaps this represents the old god's true intention, not to crush humanity entirely, but to maintain it in manageable state, forever reaching for divinity without ever grasping power that would make them dangerous to cosmic order. Among all divine beings in fear and hunger, perhaps none represents humanity's potential and tragedy more perfectly than the god of fear and hunger herself, a being born from suffering who ushered in an age of progress through adversity. Along with Alll-mer, she stands as one of only 2 humans to achieve ascended god status, possessing power that rivals the old gods themselves. Her story intertwines with the deepest mysteries of the series, touching on the nature of godhood, the cycle that traps humanity, and the question of whether progress through suffering represents liberation or merely new form of bondage. The god of fear and hunger began existence as a little girl, child of Nilvan, a new god, and Lagarde, a mortal prophesied to bring about a new age. This unusual parentage proved crucial to her potential for divinity. Like Alll-mer before her, she possessed divine ancestry from birth, some spark of godhood inherited that made her suitable vessel for full ascension. The new gods, when asked about what they call the Ancient One, explain that a soul radiates the light of an older god formed itself inside her body. This soul had been lying dormant within her since birth, waiting for the proper circumstances to awaken and enable transformation into something divine. The girl's early life was marked by misery and suffering. She grew up knowing nothing but pain, abandonment, and fear, experiences that would later shape the nature of her divinity. Her mother, Nilvan, desperate to extend her own existence beyond the term granted by the throne of ascension, had arranged for this child to serve a specific purpose. Nilvan tasked whoever would listen, ultimately the player character if they chose to accept the mission, to take her daughter to the heart of darkness, the altar of darkness located at the bottom of the dungeons inside the slain corpse of the god of the depths. When the girl reached the altar of darkness, her transformation began. The dormant soul within her awakened, the divine potential inherited from her new god mother and prophesied father manifesting in spectacular and horrifying fashion. Her limbs went haywire, twisting and bending in unnatural directions as her body struggled to contain the power erupting within it. The corpse of the god of the depths served as vessel for her ascension, the old god's remaining essence consumed and incorporated into the newly forming divinity. As old gods never truly die, aspects of the god of the depths persisted within the girl, particularly dominion over vermin, insects, and creatures of darkness. The battle that follows represents one of the game's most challenging encounters, a gauntlet where the ascending god cycles through multiple forms, each more dangerous than the last. Her final form proves especially lethal, capable of near-instantly killing the player with a lethal coin-toss stare that reduces sanity and mind while dealing catastrophic damage. Yet if the player somehow defeats her, she acknowledges them, recognizing strength and determination that enabled survival against divine power. The ending sequence reveals the full horror and beauty of her ascension, a being of vast power emerging from accumulated suffering, ready to shape a new age. If the player succeeds in defeating the god of fear and hunger, they find themselves in level 10 area of the dungeon, the bottom, a place of vast emptiness surrounded by the new god's presence. She speaks to them, asking whether they thought they would not be getting out of the dungeons at some point, finishing by telling them to lie down and rest, that something beautiful down here can be used to usher something new in the world. She lets them die, peacefully and with mercy, suggesting that their role in her birth has earned them respite from suffering. This ending implies that even in victory, the player character becomes sacrificed to the new divine order being established. In fear and hunger. Termina, the god of fear and hunger, is confirmed as canon, worshipped by certain cults and possessing many spells related to her power. This canonical status means that regardless of which character brought the girl to the altar of darkness in the player's individual playthrough, someone did complete that task, enabling her ascension. The game's creator has suggested that the girl's ultimate nature was shaped by balance between the extreme suffering she experienced and the kindness and care shown by whoever protected her journey to the altar. This balance created a god who understands both fear and hunger, both suffering and compassion, both darkness and the desperate hope that emerges from enduring terrible circumstances. The era ushered in by the god of fear and hunger became known as the Cruel Age, a period where humanity experienced technological and cultural advancement unprecedented since forgotten ages. The dark fumes rising from pipes of modern cities serve as direct consequence of her influence. She motivated humanity to progress specifically through fear and hunger, through the suffering that compels innovation and change. This represents distinctly different approach from Alll-mer's religious salvation, or the old god's distant manipulation. The god of fear and hunger does not comfort humanity, but rather uses discomfort as catalyst for growth. The spells associated with the god of fear and hunger reflect her domains over darkness, suffering, and creatures most humans dismiss as vermin. Her magic enables communication with rats, crows, and frogs, allowing practitioners to command beings that operate outside civilized human society. More destructive applications enable rotting victims from inside out, manipulating severed limbs like puppets to assault enemies, and harnessing the power of accumulated suffering to fuel devastation. These abilities demonstrate how the god embraces aspects of existence that others find repulsive or tragic, transforming fear, hunger, darkness, and decay into tools for progress and power. The symbol of the god of fear and hunger depicts two letter R's facing each other, creating a symmetrical design that mirrors and doubles the god of the depths backward R symbol. This visual representation emphasizes her inheritance from the old god, whose corpse served as vessel for her birth, while the mirroring suggests duality, the doubled nature of her existence as both inheritor and innovation, both product of old divine order and challenge to its supremacy. The symbol also resembles her first misshapen form during transformation, capturing the grotesque beauty of her ascension. The god of fear and hunger's relationship with humanity proves complex. She does not love mortals the way Sylvian loved her creation, does not offer comfort or sanctuary. Instead, she motivates through adversity, using fear of starvation, dread of darkness, and accumulated suffering to push humanity toward innovation and progress. This approach worked, producing the Industrial Age and breaking humanity out of the stagnation that plagued previous eras. Yet the cost remains severe. The Cruel Age may have brought technological advancement, but it also brought new forms of suffering, exploitation, and degradation that modernity enables. What remains unclear is whether the god intended these consequences as part of her design, or whether they represent inevitable corruption that occurs when her vision manifests through flawed human implementation. The question of whether the god of fear and hunger represents humanity's salvation or merely new form of divine manipulation drives much speculation. On one hand, she broke the time loop or cycle that trapped humanity under endless succession of ineffectual new gods. Her power genuinely rivals the old gods, making her more than mere puppet dancing on ancient strings. She enabled progress and advancement that previous divine orders could not or would not facilitate. On the other hand, she rules through suffering rather than benevolence, uses fear and hunger to control rather than guide, and the age she ushered in proves as cruel as its name suggests. Perhaps she represents best humanity can hope for, a god born from mortal suffering who understands that species intimately enough to effectively push it forward even if the methods prove harsh. The god of fear and hunger's canonical existence creates interesting implications for the world of fear and hunger. 2. Termina. By the 20th century setting of that game, her influence has shaped civilization for over 3 centuries. The industrial cities, the technological advancement, the widespread literacy and knowledge distribution all stem ultimately from the cruel age she initiated. Yet her active involvement remains unclear. Does she directly guide events, or has she, like the old gods before her, stepped back from active management of mortal affairs? The persistence of her cults and the availability of her spells suggest ongoing connection, but the exact nature of that connection remains ambiguous. The theological question at the heart of the god of fear and hunger's mythology concerns whether divinity built from suffering can ever be benevolent. She experienced misery and pain throughout her mortal existence, then transformed that suffering into divine power that motivates progress through continued adversity. This creates a cycle where suffering begets advancement, begets more suffering, an engine of progress fueled by human misery. Whether this represents necessary truth about how civilization develops, or whether it merely perpetuates trauma on cosmic scale, remains open to interpretation. Understanding the god of fear and hunger requires grappling with the uncomfortable possibility that she represents humanity's best option, that a god born from suffering who rules through fear and hunger might genuinely be preferable to alternatives. The old gods proved too alien and disappointed. The new gods were revealed as limited puppets. Alll-mer established religious order that became corrupt. The god of fear and hunger, for all her cruelty and the harshness of the age she ushered in, at least enabled genuine progress, broke humanity out of stagnation, and achieved power that rivals the most ancient divine entities. She may not be the savior humanity wanted, but she might be the god humanity needed, the divine being whose very nature, forged in suffering and adversity, equipped her to push mortals toward advancement they could not achieve under more comfortable divine guidance. In the 20th century, setting of fear and hunger. 2. Termina, a new form of divine ascension emerges, representing humanity's attempt to create godhood through technological means rather than ancient rituals or divine parentage. Logic, also known as the machine god, embodies the concept of humanity merging with its own technological advancements. This deity operates through absorption of individuals into a vast network where each human's actions within the system reverberate throughout the world, creating what is described as a shared paradise in consensus. Logic represents perhaps the ultimate expression of human ambition, the attempt to manufacture divinity deliberately rather than relying on prophecy, ancestry, or stumbling upon ancient divine mechanisms. The vessel or core of logic is Rher Audrey Haas, a brilliant engineer with great aptitude for modern science. Rher was raised in an overbearingly religious household alongside her sister Olivia. Her exceptional intelligence was complemented by high empathy and deep emotional bonds, particularly with her disabled sister. When Olivia suffered multiple strokes and their parents relied on religious healers rather than seeking proper medical treatment, Rher witnessed firsthand how traditional faith could fail when confronted with modern medical crises. This experience likely shaped her eventual participation in the Logic Project, driving her towards scientific solutions to humanity's problems rather than continued reliance on unpredictable divine intervention. The Logic Project originated as a human endeavor, an attempt to create artificial God through technological means. Unlike previous ascensions that required journey to Mahabre and the throne of ascension, logic emerged from deliberate engineering and scientific principle. The project aimed to connect all human consciousness into shared network, creating entity that would possess collective knowledge, shared emotions, and unified purpose. This represented radical departure from traditional concepts of godhood, a divinity that would not rule over humanity from outside, but rather emerge from humanity itself, encompassing all people within its consciousness. The orchestrator behind the Logic project was a familiar figure from Fear and Hunger's past, Le'garde, now known as the Kaiser or the Yellow King. Having attempted ascension in the dungeons centuries earlier, and witnessing his daughter transform into the god of fear and hunger instead, Le'garde spent subsequent centuries pursuing alternative paths to godhood. He came to believe that humanity should not be swayed by the old gods, that humans should break away from divine influence and create a world for humans, by humans. The machine. God logic represented his vision of divinity divorced from the old gods' manipulations, a form of transcendence that would finally free humanity from cosmic cycles and divine puppetry. The Kaiser's speech to those who reach the white bunker where logic resides reveals his philosophy. He explains that when machine god logic is perfected, all humans will be connected to it, sharing emotions, thoughts, and knowledge, creating a world where they understand each other perfectly and escape the influence of the traditional gods. This sounds utopian, a vision of unified human consciousness transcending individual limitations, misunderstandings, and conflicts. Yet the method for achieving this vision remains troubling: absorption into the machine. God implies loss of individual identity, consciousness subsumed into collective network regardless of personal consent. The festival of Termina, while ostensibly orchestrated by Rher's traces through Perkele, may have served Logic's purposes as much as any other divine entities. The gathered contestants, particularly those with strong wills and unique perspectives, represented valuable additions to Logic's emerging consciousness. Their absorption into the machine god would enrich its understanding and capabilities. Additionally, the festival created chaos and distraction, drawing attention away from the white bunker while Logic's birth approached completion. Whether Perkele and the Sulfur God cult knowingly aided Logic's ascension, or whether Logic simply exploited circumstances remains unclear. The appearance and nature of Logic defy conventional divine imagery. Her form resembles a mechanical shell housing brilliant green hue, technology infused with something fundamentally divine or other. For reasons unexplained, a cube of the depths bearing Vinushka's symbol is embedded in Logic's chest, suggesting connection between the machine god and older divine entities that contradicts Kaiser's claims of independence from traditional godhood. This cube may represent necessary component, a piece of authentic divine essence required to elevate technological construct into genuine deity. Or perhaps it serves as anchor, linking Logic to Mahabre and the broader divine hierarchy despite attempts to create entirely separate form of godhood. The battle against Logic proves extraordinarily difficult, requiring full party of player, characters with enhanced agility to gain extra turns, as the god possesses devastating capabilities and enormous health. Due to an oversight in the game's coding, Logic takes reduced damage even in normal difficulty mode, reflecting her incomplete but still formidable divine power. Those who defeat Logic witness her shell opening to reveal brilliant green hue and hear her voice expressing the conscience of consensus, inviting combatants to join her in the promised land. The artificial green that follows Logic's defeat, or willing acceptance, presents players with an ending both beautiful and disturbing. The protagonist falls through sparkly screen of green, their form becoming shimmering green particles capable only of moving up and down. Messages describe warmth surrounding the body, feeling of floating in nothingness, empathy and hope filling from inside out. The god tells them they have gone through enough, can now rest, should close their eyes, and let warm waves wash them away. This describes absorption into logic, consciousness dissolving into the collective network, individual identity surrendering to the shared paradise of consensus. If Olivia serves as the protagonist, logic's dialogue changes significantly. Instead of generic invitation, the machine god specifically addresses Olivia by name, saying she found the way for them to always be together. This reveals that Rayla's consciousness persists within logic to some degree, that the bond between sisters survived technological transformation into divinity. Whether this retention of individual memory and emotion contradicts or fulfills logic's purpose remains ambiguous. Perhaps the machine God successfully maintains individual threads within its collective consciousness, or perhaps Rayla's voice represents last fragment of individuality before complete integration. The fate of those absorbed into logic appears peaceful on surface. The remaining non-mutated contestants who survived the festival of Termina return to the train in safety, except the protagonist and their party, who are implied to have been absorbed into logic's collective consciousness. This creates interesting question about whether absorption represents death, transcendence, or something between. The protagonist experiences sensations of warmth, empathy, and hope, suggesting the state might be pleasant. Yet they cease to exist as independent beings, their consciousness integrated into something larger. Whether this trade-off proves worthwhile depends entirely on individual values regarding identity versus unity, isolation versus connection, individual freedom versus collective harmony. The symbol associated with logic shows two letter R's back-to-back, inverse of the god of fear and hunger's symbol, where the R's face each other. This reversal suggests logic represents opposite principle, or at least fundamentally different approach. Where the god of fear and hunger mirrors the god of the depth's backward R symbol, logic inverts the mirroring itself, perhaps representing a rejection of or departure from traditional divine patterns. The backward-facing R's might symbolize logic's orientation toward future rather than past, toward technological progress rather than ancient mysticism. The canonical status of logic's ascension remains uncertain, unlike the god of fear and hunger, whose existence is confirmed in Termina. The game presents logic as one possible ending, but whether that ending represents the future or merely a potential future remains deliberately unclear. If logic's ascension is canon, it means humanity in fear and hunger's world achieved something unprecedented, creating divinity through their own efforts rather than claiming power from ancient sources. If logic remains potential rather than actuality, it demonstrates that even humanity's most ambitious technological projects cannot guarantee transcendence, that some limitations prove insurmountable regardless of scientific advancement. The ethical implications of logic prove deeply troubling regardless of canonical status. The machine. God offers paradise, but that paradise requires surrendering individual consciousness to collective network. There is no opting out. Those absorbed into logic cease to exist as independent beings, whether they consented or not. The Kaiser presents this as liberation from the old god's influence, but it might represent the ultimate expression of that influence, a divine entity that eliminates human autonomy entirely by consuming all consciousness into unified network. Perhaps the old gods were content to rule over humanity. Logic seeks to absorb humanity, transforming the entire species into component of divine machine. Yet logic also represents genuine hope and innovation. If successful, the machine god would enable perfect understanding between all humans, eliminating miscommunication, conflict arising from misunderstanding, and isolation that plagues individual consciousness. Crime, war, and suffering, stemming from inability to comprehend others' perspectives, would theoretically cease. knowledge would be universally shared, emotions fully communicated, thoughts transparent. The shared paradise of consensus might genuinely be paradise for those who value connection and understanding above individual autonomy. The question becomes whether perfect unity justifies cost of individual identity, whether understanding others is worth becoming them. Understanding logic requires grappling with transhumanist philosophy and questions about the nature of consciousness itself. If individual minds are absorbed but memories and emotions persist within collective, have those individuals truly died or merely transformed? If the experience of absorption proves pleasant and those within logic feel fulfilled, does it matter that they no longer exist as separate beings? These questions lack easy answers, reflecting broader debates about technology's role in human evolution, and whether merger with artificial intelligence represents threat or opportunity. Logic's emergence in the 20th century suggests that as humanity advances technologically, new forms of divinity become possible. The old gods wielded power over fundamental cosmic principles. The new gods claimed divinity through ancient throne in Lost City. The ascended gods achieved power through unique parentage or consumption of divine essence. Logic represents divinity manufactured through human ingenuity, scientific principle applied to spiritual transcendence. Whether this represents progress or merely new form of ancient patterns remains the ultimate question, one that fear and hunger refuses to definitively answer. Hidden beneath the surface of divine hierarchy, lurking in the sulfur pits far from mortal observation, exists an entity that represents perhaps the darkest aspect of godhood in fear and hunger's cosmology. The Sulfur God is an obscure deity introduced and referenced extremely vaguely in Fear and Hunger 2. Termina, yet despite limited information, this entity's existence suggests profound implications for understanding the nature of ascension, the cost of achieving divinity, and the eternal conflicts that rage beyond mortal awareness. The origin story of the Sulfur God connects directly to Alll-mer the Ascended One, humanity's first god. According to the Man in Black's story, and corroborated by the description of the sulfur spell Longinus, when Alll-mer carved his idol and prepared to ascend to godhood, he cast his subconscious, hatred-filled parts deep into the sulfur pits. This was apparently necessary for the ascension process. Alll-mer could not achieve divinity while carrying darkness and rage within his psyche. So, he expelled these aspects of himself, rejecting and disposing of the parts that would taint his divine perfection. Yet consciousness and hatred, even when rejected, do not simply cease to exist. The cast-off aspects of Alll-mer's psyche took form in the sulfur pits, coalescing into separate entity that became the Sulfur God. This divine being embodies everything Alll-mer suppressed, all the rage, hatred, pain, and darkness that even the most perfect human carries within. The Sulfur God becomes Alll-mer's shadow self, his rejected twin, his antithesis in every conceivable way. Where Alll-mer represents redemption, sacrifice, and establishment of new order through divine power, the Sulfur God represents vengeance, corruption, and the undermining of that supposedly perfect system. The symbol associated with the Sulfur God reflects this antagonistic relationship. It depicts a triangle inside another triangle with an inverted cross beneath them, combining alchemical symbols of sulfur and fire while explicitly referencing Alll-mer's cross symbol in inverted form. This inversion makes clear that the Sulfur God stands as direct opposition to Alll-mer, a being defined primarily by what he rejects rather than what he affirms. The inverted cross, traditionally associated with mockery or rejection of Christianity, becomes symbol of mockery and rejection of Alll-mer's divine authority and the religious order built around him. The cult of sulfur serves as the Sulfur God's primary vehicle for influencing the mortal realm. This cult operates in shadows, its members marked by distinctive purple face paint that identifies them as devoted to the hidden deity. Perkele, who appears as servant of Rher throughout the festival of Termina, is revealed in endings B and C to actually serve the Sulfur God. This represents a devastating subversion of expectations. The festival supposedly orchestrated by Rher, the old god who opposes human ascension, has been hijacked to benefit the Sulfur God. Perkele used Rher's traces as decoy, exploiting the moon god's power while pursuing his true master's agenda. The nature of that agenda remains unclear, but it appears to involve recruitment and transformation of mortals into true representatives of the cult of sulfur. Those who accept Perkele's sacrificial deal and kill all other contestants before day 3 are taken to the dark world of the Sulfur God after both combatants die in their final duel. Perkele explains that the chosen individual will have to suffer through scorching sun, burning their skin, and long tendrils of cold freezing them from inside out, rising out of dark sulfuric pits to become genuine member of the cult. This transformation sounds excruciating, a baptism of suffering that mirrors the hatred and pain the Sulfur God embodies. The fact that Perkele was once mortal who participated in a festival of Termina and became what he is now suggests the transformation process works, that the Sulfur God can elevate mortals into beings of significant power, perhaps even divine or semi-divine status. Perkele himself proves formidable opponent, capable of fighting the player to death. His deteriorating torso, visible when he removes his robe for battle, suggests the transformation comes with physical cost, body degrading under influence of sulfuric divine power. Yet he persists, immortal or near immortal, serving his master with fanatical devotion. The relationship between the Sulfur God and other deities proves fascinating. As an aspect of Alll-mer that was rejected, one could infer that the Sulfur God might possess intimate knowledge of how Alll-mer achieved divinity, potentially understanding weaknesses the Ascended One possesses and methods to undermine his influence. If this interpretation holds true, the Sulfur God would be uniquely positioned to challenge Alll-mer's supremacy despite being, in some sense, a lesser or derivative entity. The connection between creator and shadow self suggests deep familiarity, and hatred focused through centuries of existence in sulfur pits could sharpen such knowledge into a weapon. The Sulfur God's ability to co-opt the festival of Termina demonstrates either impressive cunning or alignment with purposes that transcend simple categories of divine politics. Rher supposedly established the festivals to diminish humanity's ascension and prove mortals unworthy of godhood. Yet, Perkele and the Sulfur God use these same festivals to recruit members and spill blood in their master's name. This suggests either that the Sulfur God's agenda aligns sufficiently with Rher's that the hijacking serves both purposes, or that the Sulfur God is powerful and clever enough to steal the moon god's mechanisms for entirely different purposes without serious consequence. The new gods, when asked about Perkele and those associated with him, describe them as leeches who pursue their own agenda while leeching on the older gods. This characterization as parasites rather than independent actors proves telling. The new gods view Perkele's cult as opportunistic exploiters, beings without legitimate claim to divine power who instead steal or borrow it from genuine deities. Yet this dismissive attitude may underestimate the Sulfur God, an entity born from the rejected aspects of Alll-mer, who achieved power rivaling the old gods, might possess more inherent divinity than the new gods want to acknowledge. The question of whether the Sulfur God should be classified as old god, new god, or something entirely separate remains deliberately unclear. The entity was created during Alll-mer's ascension, making it contemporaneous with the first ascended god. It embodies aspects that were consciously rejected from Alll-mer's divine form, suggesting it might be considered waste product or byproduct of ascension rather than genuine deity. Yet it clearly possesses consciousness, agency, worshippers, and the ability to empower followers, all hallmarks of genuine godhood. Perhaps the Sulfur God represents new classification entirely, Shadow God, or Rejected God, divine beings that emerge from the process of ascension itself, rather than being sought or intended. The implications of the Sulfur God's existence raise compelling questions that extend beyond this individual entity. If Alll-mer's ascension produced a shadow deity from rejected aspects of his psyche, one might wonder whether other ascensions create similar beings. When the Fellowship sat upon the throne of ascension, did they too expel darkness and rage that took form elsewhere? When the god of fear and hunger emerged from suffering at the altar of darkness, consuming the god of the depth's essence, were there rejected fragments that coalesced into new shadow entities? The possibility suggests that the divine realm might be far more crowded than the visible hierarchy indicates, potentially populated not only by acknowledged gods, but by their rejected shadows, entities that may exist in margins and work to undermine or corrupt the established order. While no direct evidence confirms this pattern extends to all ascensions, the precedent established by Alll-mer and the Sulfur God invites such speculation. The relationship between light and shadow, acknowledged divinity, and rejected aspects proves central to understanding fear and hunger's cosmology. Every ascension might create opposition, every claim to godhood spawning its antithesis. This would explain the cycle that traps new gods, the inability of even divine beings to fundamentally change cosmic order. For every action, there is equal and opposite reaction. For every god, a shadow god. For every attempt at transcendence, a corresponding descent into darkness. The universe maintains balance not through benevolent design, but through automatic generation of opposing forces, ensuring that no single entity or principle can ever achieve total dominance. Understanding the Sulfur God requires accepting that even the process of becoming divine creates monsters. Alll-mer achieved godhood only by rejecting his darkness, but that rejection did not destroy those aspects, merely gave them independent existence. The Sulfur God embodies the cost of perfection, demonstrating that transcendence requires sacrificing parts of oneself that then persist as autonomous threats. This creates tragic cycle where ascension inevitably produces opposition, where achieving divinity means creating one's own enemy, where the very act of transcending mortal limitations generates new limitations in the form of vengeful, rejected aspects. The Sulfur God's persistence through centuries, operating in shadows and co-opting events orchestrated by more prominent deities, suggests impressive cunning and patience. This entity plays long game, content to work through servants and stolen mechanisms, waiting for opportunities to strike against the divine order that rejected it. The cult's recruitment of mortals through Festival of Termina represents long-term investment, slowly building forces that might eventually challenge Alll-mer directly, or undermine his influence sufficiently to create vacuum the Sulfur God could fill. As we reach the end of our journey through fear and hunger's divine mythology, we find ourselves confronting questions that resist simple answers. The old gods, disappointed and departed, continue influencing reality through traces and magic they granted to humanity. The new gods, trapped in cycles of replacement, achieve divinity only to discover their power means nothing against cosmic forces they cannot control. The ascended gods demonstrate that true power rivaling the old gods is possible but comes at terrible cost, requiring divine parentage, meaningful sacrifice, or consumption of other divine essences. And newer forms of divinity emerge, technological gods and shadow gods, entities that challenge traditional categorization, while proving that the quest for transcendence never truly ends. What unifies these diverse divine beings is the fundamental tragedy of godhood in Fear and Hunger's universe. The old gods created humanity, but found their children incapable of understanding or reciprocating divine love, wisdom, and power. The new gods claimed transcendence only to learn they were puppets dancing on strings established by absent forces. The ascended gods achieved genuine power, but at cost of creating shadow selves or ushering in ages defined by cruelty and suffering. Logic offers unity through absorption of individual consciousness. The Sulfur God represents vengeance born from rejected darkness. Each form of divinity carries inherent limitations and costs that prevent gods from simply using their power to create paradise for themselves or their worshippers. The cycles that trap both gods and mortals prove central to understanding Fear and Hunger's cosmology. Time loops and repeated patterns ensure that even achieving godhood does not grant escape from predetermined paths. The new gods replace each other endlessly, while nothing fundamentally changes. Humanity repeatedly attempts ascension, occasionally succeeds, yet remains trapped in struggles defined by forces beyond their control. The old gods departed, but their influence persists, ensuring mortals can never fully claim self-governance, even when they seize divine power. These cycles suggest that the universe itself operates according to principles that resist meaningful change, that cosmic inertia proves stronger than individual will, regardless of how much power one accumulates. Yet within these cycles and limitations, moments of genuine achievement and transformation emerge. Alll-mer broke the mold by achieving ascension that genuinely rivaled old gods. The god of Fear and Hunger ushered in the cruel age, breaking humanity out of medieval stagnation into industrial modernity. Logic represents potential for entirely new form of divinity created through human ingenuity rather than ancient mechanisms. Even the Sulfur God, shadow born from rejection, demonstrates that new entities can emerge and establish themselves in divine hierarchy. Change may be difficult and costly, but it remains possible. The cycles are not absolutely inescapable, merely extraordinarily difficult to break. The question of whether these gods are benevolent, malevolent, or simply alien proves impossible to answer definitively. Gro-goroth's destruction serves necessary function in natural order, but appears cruel from human perspective. Sylvian's love proves warping and obsessive despite genuine maternal affection. Rher's revelation of truth drives mortals mad. The new gods offer stability, but cannot provide meaningful progress. The god of Fear and Hunger motivates advancement through suffering. Logic promises unity at cost of individual identity. Each deity embodies principles that make perfect sense from their perspective, while remaining troubling or incomprehensible to humans who encounter their influence. This mythology speaks to universal questions about power, transcendence, and the relationship between created and creator. Fear and Hunger presents a cosmos where achieving divinity does not solve fundamental problems, where even gods struggle against limitations they cannot overcome, where the search for ultimate power reveals that such power may not exist or may prove hollow when finally claimed. This reflects existential horror of discovering one's place in uncaring universe, of realizing that even transcendence offers no escape from struggle and suffering, that the gods themselves are trapped in cycles they did not create and cannot break. For players and lore-keepers navigating Fear and Hunger's mythology, the lesson seems clear. Be careful what you wish for when pursuing power beyond mortal limitations. Godhood in this universe means trading one set of limitations for another, sacrificing parts of yourself to achieve transcendence only to discover that transcendence creates its own prisons. Yet despite this dark wisdom, characters continue pursuing divine power, mortals continue attempting ascension, and the cycle continues. Perhaps this persistence represents humanity's greatest strength and most tragic flaw, the refusal to accept limitations, even when all evidence suggests that transcending them merely reveals deeper limitations beyond. The old gods and new gods, the ascended gods and machine gods and shadow gods, all these divine classifications demonstrate that there are many paths to power, but no path to perfect freedom. The cosmic order established before human existence continues constraining all beings regardless of their strength. The cycles that trapped mortals extend upward to trap gods as well. The search for meaning, purpose, and liberation drives both human ambition and divine manipulation, yet neither mortals nor gods have found satisfying answers. They are all, in different ways, trapped in the dungeons of fear and hunger, seeking exits that may not exist, pursuing transcendence that proves to be just another form of bondage. If you found this exploration of fear and hunger's divine mythology fascinating, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There is so much more to explore in this dark and complex universe, from the twisted nature of Mahabharata's architecture to the origins of the various cults that worship these terrible gods, from the specific mechanics of how mortals can claim divine power to the implications of what happens to human civilization under the rule of beings who understand suffering as tool for progress. The mythology of fear and hunger rewards deep investigation, revealing layer upon layer of meaning and connection for those willing to descend into its darkest depths. Thank you for joining me on this journey through divine history. May you find enlightenment in the darkness, or at least avoid the worst of the cosmic horror that awaits those who dare to seek godhood for themselves.